Chapter 5172. Without waiting for Ling Jiju to finish, Yi Yaotian looked at Qin Jing and Cheng Pai and said, "Since sword friend Ling said so, how can we not return the favor? Let's go, we must discuss this matter properly and not disappoint Ling Jian." The three Heavenly Demon Sect Vice Sect Masters also smiled and said, "Yes, yes, we will listen to Senior Ye's orders and not disappoint Ling Jian." Haha. Alright, ye family head and five sword friends, please make the decision. Ling Jiju also laughed and cupped his fists at the six people. We will listen. Void Heaven Sword School's Qin Jing and Clear Sword Sect's Cheng Pai also had a knot in their hearts, but they didn't dare to show it in front of Zhuoming. Now that the High Wind Sword Sect's conditions weren't harsh, the knot in their hearts slowly disappeared. They smiled and said, "With Sword Friend Ye's words, we can rest assured. This matter was initiated by Sword Friend Yi. We will listen to Sword Friend Ye's orders." Haha, this old man is afraid. Yi Yaotian looked at the three people meaningfully and raised his hand. "Sword friends, please. Sword Friend Yi, please." The others raised their hands and invited Yi Yaotian to go first. Yi Yaotian pondered for a moment and flew into the depths of the mountain range. Under Ling Jiju's modesty, Qin Jing and Cheng Pai went first. Ling Jiju looked at Yu Zhongkui and the others, but how could they dare to go first? He hurriedly and respectfully invited Ling Jiju to fly first, and he and the others walked last. After all, this was something that the Yi clan, Void Heaven Sword School, Bright Sword Sect, and Heavenly Demon Sect had planned for a long time. With the addition of the High Wind Sword Sect's strength, Ling Jiju had indeed handed over the High Wind Sword Sect's forces to Yi Yaotian. Most of the time, they were only discussing how to divide the Fortune Gate and Sky Patrol City. Moreover, there was no need to be too detailed. As for the three deputy sect masters of the Heavenly Demon Sect, they didn't even dare to fart. Therefore, in less than an hour, Yi Yaotian flew out from the mountain range and called the Yi clan's disciples who were guarding outside to return to Sky Patrol City. Seeing that dawn was approaching, as Yi Yaotian had expected, Yu Tong came to visit him again. When they met, Yi Yaotian went straight to the point. "Little friend Yu, what does Sir Immortal Envoy have to say?" Yu Tong looked at Yi Yaotian and said with a frown, "Senior Yi, it looks like you mean AI." Yi Yaotian sighs and says, "This old man is somewhat unworthy of Lord Immortal Envoy." After little friend Yu left, this old man immediately sent someone to send a message and scolded Shi Xiang. However, Shi Xiang's reply was also sincere. He said that he fell in love with Fairy Wuxia at first sight, and really wanted to become sword companions with her. Moreover, he was afraid that this old man wouldn't agree, so he took great pains to tell little friend Yu about this matter first. When he spoke up to hear, Yi Yaotian hesitated for a moment, and then he probed. There are truly too few women in the world that can make Shi Xiang fall in love with them. Finding a direct descendant of my Yi clan has already become a headache for this old man. Now that he's finally found one, this old man feels that. Can I ask Lord Immortal Emissary to make an exception, and give Shi Xiang and my Yi clan a chance under the circumstances that it doesn't affect the entire operation? The corner of Yu Tong's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. He said, "Senior Yi, please don't worry." Lord Immortal Emissary was very displeased at first and was somewhat angry. After all, this matter has reached a critical point, so how could he complicate things? However, after this junior tried to persuade him for a long time, he calmed down and said that all marriages in the world are predestined by the heavens. Since the Yi clan's young master fell in love with Fairy Wuxia at first sight, this old man couldn't break up the affectionate couple. However, this old man didn't know if Fairy Wuxia had the same thoughts as the young master. After all, this junior had previously reported to this old man about Fairy Wuxia and Xiaohua. Xiaohua has been dead for hundreds of years. Even if Fairy Wuxia and Xiaohua had some emotional entanglements, it should have been destroyed by now, right? Yi Yaotian said disdainfully. If Shi Xiang wasn't completely confident, why would he speak up? Not necessarily. Yu Tong shook his head. According to this junior's knowledge, Fairy Wuxia is very loyal to her feelings. In the hundreds of years since Xiaohua's death, she hasn't spoken a word to any male cultivator. If it weren't for Xiao Mao by the young master's side, we wouldn't have been able to invite her to Sentry City. Let's not care about Fairy Hongxia's attitude for now. Yi Yaotian said. Just tell us what Lord Immortal Emissary has instructed us to do. Lord Immortal Emissary said that the operation will proceed as planned, just as we discussed before. Yu Tong said solemnly. However, we can give the young master a chance during the operation. If the young master can really turn the pretense into reality, there's no harm in pushing the boat along with the current to accomplish this good deed. However, if the young master doesn't have the ability and Fairy Hongxia rejects the young master, then this old man will severely punish this little bastard. Before Yu Tong could finish speaking, Yi Yaotian immediately interrupted. When this matter is over, I'll have him bring a bramble and ask for punishment from Lord Immortal Emissary. There's no need for that. Yu Tong waved his hand and said, Lord Immortal Emissary said that if this matter doesn't succeed, the young master should restrain himself and not do things that are arbitrary and unrealistic. Yes, this old man understands. Yi Yaotian hurriedly bowed and said, This old man already understands Lord Immortal Emissary's meaning. Little friend Yu, please convey this old man's gratitude to Lord Immortal Emissary. Well said, well said. Yu Tong returned the bow and said, This junior will take his leave now and immediately report this matter to Lord Immortal Emissary. The arrangements for Century City will depend on senior. Little friend Yu, please. Yi Yaotian smiled and said, This old man won't see you off. Yu Tong replied, I dare not trouble Senior Yi. As soon as they turned around, a meaningful smile appeared on the faces of the old man and the young man. Night had passed, and day had arrived. The falling snowflakes above Century City did not slow down at all. As the light curtain above the sky became brighter, the snowflakes fell even more heavily. Yu Tong walked slowly on the street with a calm expression on his face. His starry eyes were even colder. The falling snowflakes floating in front of his eyes could not cause the slightest ripple in his cold eyes. When he turned a corner, he saw sword cultivators patrolling Century City flying past him. He stopped for a moment and turned his eyes. A sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth, as if he had just woken up from his contemplation. He muttered softly, Humans are really greedy, clang, 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 clang. Right at this moment, bell tolls resounded from the tall city wall behind Yu Tong. However, the expressions of the sword cultivators who just approached Yu Tong changed drastically. They glanced at each other and cried out in alarm. Enemy attack? Is this the sound of an enemy attack? How is this possible? As they spoke, several sword cultivators soared into the sky and flew straight to the city wall. Yu Tong was stunned and hurriedly turned around to look. He saw that all over Century City, as the bell rang, the patrolling sword cultivators flew up one after another. Near the city lord mansion, sword cultivators swarmed out in groups and flew around Century City. Obviously, they were going to strengthen the defense. After a dozen bell rings it stopped, but after half a cup of tea's time, dang dang dang. It sounded even more urgent, and during this short pause, there was the ear-piercing sound of swords piercing through the air. Yu Tong pondered for a moment, and his face showed excitement. He pinched his chin and whispered, If I'm not wrong, this should be the signal of an enemy attack. At this time, who dares to attack Century City? I'm afraid it's only the Fortune Gate that has been tricked. According to my thinking, this enemy attack should be 10 days later, but I didn't expect that the Fortune Gate that swallowed the bait is not an ordinary sect. They actually disrupted my deployment and launched an attack in advance. However, the bait is bait, and the prey is the prey. Since the plan is set, how can a salted fish turn the tables? However, I've been planning for so long, please don't let anything go wrong. After saying that, Yu Tong's figure swayed and disappeared strangely. He was really worried about letting Yin Guichong be the mastermind for such a big matter. Unlike the confident Yu Tong, Yi Guxing, who had just landed on top of the city wall, had a confused look on his face. Not knowing what to do, he looked at the swordsman who was guarding the city wall and growled, Meng Peng, are you serious? Century City is surrounded by Dao Sect's cultivators? Meng Peng sighed. He understood Yi Guxing's doubts. Even Meng Peng himself could not believe it when he saw the message. It was just an ordinary signal of an enemy attack. It was only after he received more messages that he sent out the emergency signal. Thus he nodded and said, "Yes, I can confirm it, otherwise I wouldn't have sent out the emergency signal. However, I don't know which Dao sects are besieging us. I've sent out all the patrolling disciples." Unfortunately, before he could finish, Yi Guxing frowned and pointed to a dozen tool cultivators in yellow robes in the distance and asked, "What about them? I remember that they're also disciples of the patrolling team." Meng Peng smiled bitterly and said, "Reporting to the sword master on duty, the patrolling disciples of Sentry City are divided into 5 teams. I have 3 teams from the Mountain Patrol Sword Sect, 1 each from the Flying Feather Sect and the Quilted Mountain Sect. I only have the authority to dispatch the 3 teams from the Mountain Patrol Sword Sect. I don't have the authority to dispatch the other 2 teams. Where are the patrolling generals of the Flying Feather Sect and the Quilted Mountain Sect today?" Yi Guxing's eyes were filled with anger as he growled and asked. Meng Peng shook his head and said, "I don't know. I only completed my task according to the arrangement of the sword master on duty. I didn't dare to ask about the Flying Feather Sect and the Quilted Mountain Sect." D*****. Yi Guxing cursed. At this moment, there were a few rumbling sounds of magic weapons. 3 tool cultivators who were almost naked and had many strange runes on their bodies flew out from Sentry City. They dashed in midair and looked unscrupulous. The tool cultivator in the lead was thin and tall. His pair of withered yellow eyes were shining. He scanned Yi Guxing with his cold divine thought and growled, "Fellow Sword Yi, I heard from Zhuanghong that there's an enemy attack in Sentry City. What's the exact situation? Who dares to pluck a tiger's fur? I'll tear them apart and eat them. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian. Vote for it, vote for it, vote for it, give it a tip, and..." Chapter 5173. Yi Guxing looked at a squarish weapon cultivator behind the weapon cultivator, and replied faintly, "Zhuanghong, Zhu Jing is also the city guard general. Since he has already reported it, what else do you need me to say?" The squarish weapon cultivator, Zhu Jing, might be a little embarrassed, but he did not show it on his face. He said with a calm expression, "Sword Master Yi, I received the news and hurried to report it to my sword master, so the information I received is not accurate." Haha. The leader of the weapon cultivators, Zhuanghong, smiled and said, "Zhu Jing is only defending a corner of the Sky Patrol City. How can he know more than General Meng? Moreover, the defense and affairs of the entire Sky Patrol City are under Sword Master Ye's control. I'm only here to assist. My Flying Feather Sect naturally doesn't know more than the Sky Patrol Sword Sect." Yi Guxing sighed slightly when he heard Zhuanghong exculpating Zhu Jing. He also knew that the 3 sides of the Sky Patrol City's defense could not be messed up in the face of unknown enemies, so he said, "It's like this." Unfortunately, before he could finish his sentence, a strong gust of wind howled as several huge beast cultivators descended from the sky. The beast cultivator in front was several times larger than an ordinary person. His face was covered in white hair. Before he landed on the ground, he roared like a bear, "Fellow swordsman Yi, which blind bastard dares to offend my Sky Patrol City?" Yi Guxing felt a primitive violence from this beast cultivator. He did not dare to mock Zhuanghong like he did before. Instead, he changed his tone and said faintly, "Sword Master Xuecheng, you came at the right time. We were just worried. The city guard general of the Sky Patrol City today is Meng Peng. His patrol team found unknown Dao cultivator disciples approaching the Sky Patrol City, but we don't know how many there are and why they are here. Roar, isn't that simple?" The beast cultivator, Xuecheng, roared and turned around. "Crane Lord, you're the city guard general of the Quilted Mountain Sect today. Why aren't you going to investigate?" "Yes, your subordinate obeys." A thin and tall beast cultivator behind Xuecheng hurriedly flashed out and flew into the sky. When a yellow light flashed behind him, a pair of fleshy wings extended from his body. He then shouted a few times and the previously lazy beast cultivators immediately became spirited. Each of them used their abilities to fly into the sky and disappeared after a while. Seeing that the beast cultivators' Quilted Mountain Sect had taken action, the weapon cultivators' Flying Feather Sect was too embarrassed to refuse. Zhuang turned around and gave a few instructions. Zhu Jing also led the Weapon Cultivators patrol team and flew out of Sky Patrol City, reporting to the 3 sword masters on duty. Meng Peng saw Yi Guxing winking at him and hurriedly bowed. I was guarding the city when I received a report from my patrolling disciples. If I'm not mistaken, other than the area where the sword tomb is located, a large number of Dao cultivator disciples have appeared in the other areas. Motherf *Ker, is this the Great War of Dao and Sword? After listening to Meng Peng's brief report, Xueqing became a little excited and shouted, "Why didn't I hear anything beforehand?" Zhuang Hong was also surprised. He turned to look at Yi Guxing. At this moment, Yi Guxing's brows were tightly knitted. He had thought a lot during this short period of time. He looked at Zhuang Hong and Xueqing and nodded solemnly. What sword friend Xue said makes sense. What? Is the Great War of Sword Dao really about to start? This time, even Zhuang Hong could not remain calm. He exclaimed, "How's that possible? The 3 kingdoms of Dao cultivators. How can they start the Great War of Sword Dao first? Why not?" Xueqing was very happy when he heard Yi Guxing agree with his idea. He shouted, "Previously, when Sky Patrol City was controlled by Dao cultivators, it was Hung Nation sword cultivators who started the Great War of Sword Dao. Now that Sky Patrol City is controlled by sword cultivators, it's only natural that the Dao cultivators will start the Great War of Sword Dao." No, it's not that simple. Zhuang Hong shook his head and said, "Putting aside the fact that it's only been less than 1,000 years since the last Great War of Dao and Sword cultivators, there's no need for Sword Dao and Dao cultivators to start a Great War of Sword Dao. Let's talk about the current Donrain continent. Apart from sword cultivators, Dao cultivators from the 3 kingdoms of cultivation, there's also the Heavenly Demonic Sect. Moreover, the Heavenly Demonic Sect's strength is expanding rapidly. There's a faint tripartite balance of forces. How could the Great War of Dao and Sword Dao be started so easily? Don't the Dao cultivators fear the Heavenly Demonic Sect's strength?" Yes, Yi Guxing nodded and said, "Sword friend Zhuang is right. There's no reason for the Dao cultivators to start the Great War of Dao and Sword Dao. In the last Great War of Dao and Sword Dao, Hung Nation's sword cultivators achieved an unprecedented victory. The 3 nations of Dao cultivators suffered a great loss. It's impossible for them to recover in just a few hundred years. Moreover, the Million Ming Mountains have been very peaceful for the past few hundred years. Hung Nation has not deployed any troops in the Million Ming Mountains area. Their strength has been increasing while the Dao cultivators' strength has been declining due to the great change in heaven and earth's spiritual energy. How could they start the Great War of Dao and Sword Dao in a hurry?" Motherf *Ker. Xueqing was confused. He asked curiously, "Yi Guxing, didn't you agree with me just now? Why did you change your mind after I finished speaking?" "Haha," Yi Guxing laughed. "I agree with your last sentence." "My last sentence?" Xueqing was even more confused. "That's right." Zhuang Hong nodded slightly and said, "Whether it's the Great War of Dao and Sword Dao or the siege of the city by other Dao cultivators, why didn't we hear anything about it beforehand? There's definitely a problem." Yi Guxing was shocked. He looked at Meng Peng and said, "Meng Peng, do you have anything to say?" Meng Peng's forehead was covered in sweat. He said with some fear, "Sword Master Yi, Sword Master Xue's words reminded me. I suddenly remembered that in the past few months, many of the patrolling disciples in Sky Patrol City have died. Damn it!" Yi Guxing cursed angrily. "Why didn't you report this to me earlier?" Meng Peng opened his mouth to speak, but he quickly swallowed his words. He lowered his head and said, "Sword Master Yi, it's my negligence. After all, there are patrolling disciples who die in Sky Patrol City every year. Although many have died in the past few months, it's still within a manageable range, so..." Meng Peng's hesitation fell into Yi Guxing's eyes. He thought for a moment and understood Meng Peng's difficulties. It was not that Meng Peng did not report it, but it was clearly that the 3 sword masters who were in charge of the City Lord Mansion, including himself, did not pay attention to Meng Peng's report. Moreover, Yigushing knew very well that there were advantages and disadvantages to having the three sword sects in charge of Sky Patrol City. The past 1,000 years of peace had long made him and the others let down their guard. Their sense of smell was not as sharp as it was 1,000 years ago. However, Yigushing did not show it. Instead, he scolded. If that's the case, why don't you hurry up and find out? Yes, I'll. Mengpeng did not know if Yigushing understood. He did not dare to gamble. Since he did not intend to make it clear, he could only take responsibility. He hurriedly agreed and did not dare to delay. He urged his body to fly away. However, at this moment, above Sky Patrol City, a black shadow that was hundreds of feet tall flew down from the dense red clouds. When it flew closer, Mengpeng could see clearly that it was the light shadow of a green crane. The green crane flapped its wings and swept away the snow nearby. When the green crane landed, its wings trembled strangely and contracted. The huge light shadow slowly disappeared, revealing the figure of Crane Lord. How is it? Shueqing grinned and asked. Did you find out anything? General Meng, you don't have to go. Although Crane Lord's figure was revealed, his body was still trembling uncontrollably. There were light red beads of sweat between his eyebrows, but he said proudly, I found out that there are nearly 2 million Dao cultivators surrounding Sky Patrol City, more than 500 miles away. What? 2 million Dao cultivators? Yigushing was not the only one who turned pale. Zhuanghong and Shueqing's expressions changed drastically as they exclaimed, Are you sure? Crane Lord rolled his slightly withered eyes and replied, Of course I'm not completely sure. After all, I can only find out the approximate number of cultivators in a certain direction in such a short time. However, based on the number of cultivators in this area, I estimate that there are more than 2 million Dao cultivators surrounding the city. Seeing how Hejun's body only stopped trembling as he spoke, Yigushing knew that Hejun must have used some kind of beast cultivation secret technique. In such a short period of time, he had rushed to a certain direction to check the number of people before returning. Even he didn't have such a magical ability. However, he looked at Crane Lord's calm expression and did not panic like him and the others. He pondered for a moment and said, Since you said there are 2 million Dao cultivators, then there are 2 million Dao cultivators. But, it seems like you have a plan? Could it be that you already know the origin of these Dao cultivators? Crane Lord nodded proudly and said, That's right. I've found out that although there are many Dao cultivators, they are nothing in the eyes of the Three Swords sect. Oh. Before Yigushing could speak, Shueqing asked curiously, Why do you say so? Could it be that the cultivation of these Dao cultivators is extremely low? Yigushing thought of a possibility and asked tentatively. That's right. Crane Lord's stiff face squeezed out a smile and replied, I don't know about the situation in other places, but from what I've found out, the highest cultivation level is estimated to be at the middle stage of Golden Core. Damn it. Shueqing shouted. Isn't this the great war between Dao and Sword? Yigushing was also dumbfounded. He looked at Zhuanghong and both of their eyes were filled with disbelief. Zhuanghong groaned softly. More than 2 million Dao cultivators? Which sects in the 3 kingdoms of cultivation gathered this number? Where was their meeting hall located? Why haven't I heard anything about this in Sky Patrol City? Shueqing sneered and said, Nonsense, didn't the Mountain Patrol Sword sect kill many of their patrolling disciples? I think they must have found something. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian, vote for it, vote for it, vote for it, give it a tip, and thank you to Benben, Hooligan Hero, Kai Kai in the Rain, Lonely Asylum, Yongchang, Honghua, Heaven-Defying Radish, Dao Master, Deep Breath, and Ferlin for their tips. Today, I'll release a chapter to satisfy your cravings, then I'll release it slowly. Chapter 5174. Doesn't your Quilted Mountain sect have any patrolling disciples? Yigushing asked coldly. Shueqing patted his chest and said proudly, Of course. It's simple. Yigushing retorted. That's because your Sword's Gate didn't send any patrolling disciples out of the Sky Patrol City. Only my Sky Patrol Sword Gate is responsible for patrolling the entire Sky Patrol City. Who said so? Shueqing roared. Ahem ahem. Zhuanghang coughed and said. There's no need to say anything else now. The three of us must not be suspicious of each other. Only by working together can we overcome this crisis. Xuecheng was about to say something when a sword chime sounded. Everyone quickly looked up and saw a blood-red sword ray landing in front of Meng Peng in the blink of an eye. Meng Peng did not dare to delay and quickly grabbed the sword ray. He looked at it and respectfully presented it to Yi Guxing. Reporting to Sword Lord Yi, it's a blood sword message from a patrolling disciple. Yi Guxing took the blood-red sword that was a few inches long and as wide as a finger. He took a deep breath and flicked his finger to send a sword ray into the sword. Then a hurried voice sounded. Reporting to Meng Jiangjun. I've found out that the ones besieging our Sky Patrol city are the disciples of Swallow Mountain Manor. Swallow Mountain Manor? Everyone was stunned and looked at each other. It was as if they had never heard of this Dao cultivation sect before. Is it a very powerful cultivation family? Zhuanghang hesitated and asked Yi Guxing. Yi Guxing also shook his head blankly. At this time, Meng Peng seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly said. Reporting to the three sword lords, Swallow Mountain Manor is the biggest branch of the Fortune Gate. Could it be that the ones besieging the Sky Patrol city are the Fortune Gate? Meng Peng's words seemed to have awakened everyone from their dreams. Yi Guxing, Zhuanghang, and Xuecheng all gasped and said, That's right. It's the Fortune Gate. Yi Guxing then looked at the gloomy sky in the distance and said, Among the 4 countries, only the Fortune Gate can send out 2 million disciples at once. Only in the so-called Fortune Gate, the strongest disciple is only at the intermediate gold core realm. Zhuanghang added with a faint smile. Damn it. Xuecheng was relieved. He glanced at He-jun and laughed. No wonder you said they were useless. No matter how many Fortune Gate disciples there are, how could they be a match for our Sky Patrol city's 3 Swords Gate? However, Xuecheng stopped abruptly at this point. His expression changed drastically as he looked at Yi Guxing and Zhuanghang. His heart, which had just relaxed a little, immediately tightened. His eyes were filled with shock. Although Yi Guxing, Zhuanghang, and Xuecheng were not strong enough in the eyes of Yi Yaotian and the others, they were much stronger than Zhong Haoran, Fei Yunshu and Zhong Zhan. It only took them a moment to realize something. Yi Guxing shouted without hesitation. Quick, pass down the Swordmaster's order and activate the sword formation of the Sky Patrol city. Yes. Meng Peng didn't understand why the 3 sword masters on duty suddenly panicked, but he didn't hesitate to bow and leave. Damn it. Xuecheng cursed in his heart. A mere Fortune Gate dares to covet our Sky Patrol city. There must be a great conspiracy behind this. Zhuanghang also released his divine sense to check the surroundings. There was a hint of uneasiness on his face as he said in a low voice. They clearly know that we are in the Sky Patrol city, but they still dare to besiege us. They must be instigated by a nascent Soul Realm Master. That's right. A cold light flashed in Yi Guxing's eyes as he nodded. If I'm not mistaken, these Fortune Gate disciples are just a cover. After they attack, there will be a nascent Soul Realm Master who will take advantage of the chaos to attack. Moreover, how could these scattered Fortune Gate disciples know how to seal the news and kill our Sky Patrol city's disciples without us knowing? If that's the case, our Sky Patrol city is in danger. Zhuanghang frowned. Our Sky Patrol city's battle force is in the open, while those hidden cultivators are in the dark. Although these 2 million Fortune Gate disciples are nothing to be afraid of, they are enough to entangle our Sky Patrol city's swordsmen. If we are ambushed by those nascent Soul Realm Masters, Yi Guxing said coldly, why do they have to go to this extent? These 2 million Fortune Gate disciples besieging our city is not a Dao sword battle, but a Dao sword battle. No matter the outcome of this battle, it will become the catalyst for another Dao sword battle. Zhuanghang and Xuecheng gasped again and exclaimed, That's right. This will become the blood evidence for the Dao sword cultivators to attack our Sky Patrol city. Damn it. Xuecheng gritted his teeth and said, Are these Fortune Gate disciples brainless? Although the Fortune Gate is another major force on the Dawn Rain mainland after the Heavenly Demon sect, they are still in a state of disunity. Yi Guxing thought for a moment and said, In the past, the Heavenly Demon sect and Black Heaven sect became famous in a single battle, and no one dared to underestimate them. Now, the Fortune Gate wants to follow in the footsteps of the Heavenly Demon Sect and become famous in a single battle in the Sky Patrol City. Zhuang Hong smiled bitterly and said, "Why didn't this *T Fortune Gate come earlier or later? Why did they come when our Three Swords Gates are in charge of the Sky Patrol City? Our Three Swords Gates are not the strongest in the Huan country." Oh. When Yi Guxing heard this, he quickly said, "Well said, sword friend Zhuang. The Sky Patrol City does not belong to our mountain patrolling Sword Gate, your Soaring Feather Sect, and the Quilted Mountain Sect. Now that all the sects have disciples in the Sky Patrol City, quick, get them to come out and fight." Xuecheng squinted his eyes and said, "That's right, sword friend Yi is right. We should enjoy blessings and endure hardships together. How can they slack off when the Fortune Gate disciples are surrounding the city?" Boom. At this moment, several sword lights as thick as a waterfall soared into the sky and fell rapidly in midair. The sword lights were like flowing water, and the sword lights were like swimming fishes. In less than half a cup of tea's time, the Sky Patrol City was firmly protected. As the Sky Patrol City's sword formation was laid out, the sword cultivators guarding the sword formation flew out one after another. However, looking at the sparse number of sword cultivators, even Zhuang Hong and Xuecheng felt a little awkward. After all, the sword formation was laid out by sword cultivators. Weapon cultivators and beast cultivators could not help much. If the Three Swords Gates could fully activate the sword formation, the mountain patrolling Sword Gate disciples could not even activate 30% of the sword formation. In an instant, the three sword masters on duty understood why the Fortune Gate disciples would besiege the Sky Patrol City when they were on duty. "Mengpeng!" Yi Guxing shouted, his voice was like a sword's chime. "Yes, sir." Mengpeng had already flown to the left. At this time, he responded and sped up his sword light, landing in front of everyone. "Quickly pass down the city lord's order." Yi Guxing did not hesitate to take out a small golden sword and handed it to Mengpeng. "Summon all the sword cultivators in the Sky Patrol City to face the enemy, especially the Sword Gate disciples. Form a sword formation on the city wall to defend against the enemy." "Don't worry." Zhuang Hong and Xuecheng looked at each other and spoke at the same time. They each took out a golden sword and handed it to Mengpeng. "Take our flying swords, kill whoever dares to disobey." "Yes, your subordinate obeys." Mengpeng respectfully took the 3 golden swords and looked around. He then waved his hand and led dozens of subordinates into the city to pass down the message. "Thank you, sword friends." Seeing Mengpeng's figure disappear, Yi Guxing's heart felt relieved. He looked at Zhuang Hong and Xuecheng and cupped his fists. After all, the effect of 3 golden swords was completely different from 1 golden sword. "You're welcome." Zhuang Hong and Xuecheng hurriedly returned the gesture. "This is what we should do." And Yi Guxing stood up and pondered for a moment. He looked at Xuecheng and said, "Sword friend Xue, I have a presumptuous request. I hope you can agree to it." Xuecheng hurriedly replied, "Oh, what is it, sword friend Yi? Please tell us." Yi Guxing looked at He Jun and smiled bitterly. "What else can it be? The other sword cultivators in Hung Country are unaware that we're surrounded in Sky Patrol City. Judging by the situation, the Dao cultivators must have cut off the communication between Sky Patrol City and Hung Country. Although there is a secret teleportation formation from Sky Patrol City to the outskirts of the city, since this teleportation formation was built by Dao cultivators, they must know where the teleportation formation leads to. Our first priority is to send the message back to Hung Country. At this time in Sky Patrol City, the only one who can accomplish this task is He Jun." Zhuang Hong immediately understood Yi Guxing's meaning and added, "However, this trip is too dangerous. Even if sword friend Yi has thought of this, you can't not tell sword friend Xue, right?" "Sigh yes." Yi Guxing sighed and replied, "This is a trip to the tiger's den. I can't use the sword master token to give orders. I can only ask for your help." Xuecheng naturally thought that the two of them were telling the truth. He looked at He Jun and did not say anything directly. It was obvious that he was asking for his opinion. After all, everyone knew that there must be nascent soul grandmasters near Sky Patrol City. If He Jun wanted to send a message, he would have to go through the nascent soul grandmasters first. If that's the case, why don't I make the trip? He-jun was still as arrogant as ever. All right. Xuecheng clapped his hands and said, He-jun, I know that it's unfair for you to be the general guarding the city. After this battle I'll definitely. Swordmaster Xue. Before Xuecheng could finish, He-jun raised his hand and said, Say no more. It won't be too late to tell me when I return to Hung Country. All right. Xuecheng raised his hand and patted He-jun's shoulder. Don't worry, I won't go back on my word. I'll go now. As He-jun spoke, his body trembled again. As his muscles intertwined and twisted, feathers emerged from his body. Then the muscles on his back turned into wings. He flapped his wings and was about to soar into the sky. Vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, bookmark it and tip it. Thank you to Benben, Hooligan Swordsman, Kai Kai in the Rain, Lonely Asylum, Theblisky One, and other fellow Taoists for their tips. Yongchang, Honghua, Nature-Defying Radish, Tao Lord, Deep Breath, Ferlin, and other fellow Taoists for their tips. I'll add more chapters for all of you today. At the same time, I'd like to thank everyone who follows the path of spirit cultivation. Fellow Taoists, your strong support and tireless reading gave me the strength to write. Chapter 5175. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. However, Lord Crane suddenly waved his hand and a blood-red amber-like object fell in front of Xuecheng. Lord Crane said resolutely, Swordmaster Xue, this is my blood feather of life. If I don't return to Huan Country smoothly, this blood feather of life will shatter. Xuecheng, who had always been fearless, suddenly felt desolate when he saw the blood feather of life. He opened his mouth to say something but felt that it would be useless. He simply raised his hand and took the blood feather of life. He nodded and said, Go ahead, Lord Crane. Woo-woo. Lord Crane flapped his wings and turned into a green crane again. He soared into the sky and disappeared in a moment. Sigh, I hope he can break through the siege. Xuecheng sighed. If it's possible. Zhuanghong said softly, I'd rather go out and see which sect is behind this. If you go out, won't you fall into their trap? Yi Guxing smiled. They can't wait for one of us to break through the siege, so that they can defeat us one by one. They're too cunning. Xuecheng cursed softly. Just as he was about to speak, a voice was heard from afar. Oh, seniors, what's going on? I heard that there are disciples of Tao cultivators surrounding the city. Do you want us to defend against the enemy? Yi Guxing and the rest looked up. Wasn't that the handsome young master of the Yi clan, Yi Shixiang? Although Yi Shixiang addressed Yi Guxing and the rest as seniors, Yi Guxing and the rest did not dare to slight him. They quickly smiled and said to Yi Shixiang, who was a second-grade swordsman, Sword Master Yi, you're too kind. Although we're old friends with Elder Yi, you're also a swordsman. You don't have to call us seniors. Yi Shixiang said seriously, Senior Yi, you're wrong. Before I came to Sky Patrol City, the old man made it clear that I have to follow the 3 sword masters' orders. If I don't address the sword masters as my senior, I will be punished by the old man when I return. Xuecheng seemed to dislike Yi Shixiang. He glanced at the hundreds of disciples behind him and sneered. Nephew Yi, you have a lot of disciples. It's as if there's going to be a battle in Sky Patrol City. Yi Shixiang smiled lightly. He knew in his heart that the Yi clan was very cautious before the Sword Tao Great War. Even in the Hung Kingdom, only the sword master of the Swords Gate knew about it. Swordsmen like Xuecheng, who were only at the 3rd grade of the illusory sword, or the 1st grade of the transformation sword, would never know about it. It was only after the Great Sword Tao War that the Yi clan began to follow the trend and stand out with the rise of the cultivation families in the 3 kingdoms. This caused some sword sects to covet and be dissatisfied with them. Therefore, Xuecheng's reaction today was completely within Yi Shixiang's expectations. He replied calmly, I've already reported this to the 3 sword masters when I entered Sky Patrol City. If it weren't for the sake of showing off the Yi clan's strength, and wanting to form an alliance with the Taoist clans to fight for more benefits for the sword cultivators of our Hung Nation, I wouldn't have brought so many disciples here so ostentatiously. Haha. Yi Guxing laughed heartily. Since you've brought so many disciples with you, it's a good time to use them today. Yi Guxing raised his hand and pointed into the distance. Nephew Yi, take a look. The left side of Sky Patrol City is now surrounded by nearly 1 million Taoist cultivators. Before Yi Guxing could finish, Yi Shixiang exclaimed, "What? Sword Master Yi, you're right, aren't you? 1 million Taoist cultivators? This isn't a great sword Dao war, is it? Why would we have the time to joke with you?" Xueqing said coldly. "If you don't believe me, go and see for yourself." Zhuanghong rolled his eyes and smiled. "That's right. Nephew Yi, from the information we've just received, Sky Patrol City hasn't been completely besieged yet. We haven't told anyone about this yet. You have the strength of a second-grade sword transformation realm cultivator. In terms of combat power, you're close to the late stage of the nascent soul realm. Instead of staying here to fight the enemy with us, why don't you bring the Yi clan's disciples out? Not only can you protect the Yi clan's descendants, but you can also send a message to the sword cultivators of Hung Nation." While Zhuanghong was speaking, a soft caw sound was heard. The blood feather of life in Xueqing's hand suddenly cracked. Strands of dirty blood seeped out from the crack. Xueqing naturally didn't expect Lord Crane to be killed so quickly. He was shocked. Just as he was about to keep the blood feather of life, Yi Shixiang saw it and asked curiously, "Senior Xue, what's that?" "Oh, it's nothing, it's nothing." Xueqing looked at Zhuanghong. The two of them exchanged glances. They were perfunctory and kept the broken blood feather of life as if nothing had happened. Yi Shixiang acted as if he didn't know. He sighed and said, "If it's just the Yi clan's disciples in Sky Patrol City, I'll definitely risk my life to break out. However, the Yi clan and the cultivator aristocratic families of the three nations are discussing the two alliances here. How can we leave them here and escape by ourselves? If that's the case, won't the Yi clan be regarded as a treacherous bunch? Wouldn't all of you be disgraced?" "Haha, that's true." Yi Guxing smiled and said, "Nephew Yi, take a look and we'll discuss how to defend against the enemy later." "I don't dare to say what we'll discuss," Yi Shixiang said humbly. "I'll take a look first and report to all of you if I find anything." "Wait!" Xueqing suddenly shouted when he saw that Yi Shixiang was about to leave with his disciples. Yi Shixiang frowned slightly. However, he stopped and asked faintly, "Senior, do you have any other instructions? You said that there are cultivator aristocratic families in Sky Patrol City, discussing the alliance with the Yi clan?" Xueqing asked. Yi Shixiang sneered in his heart. He was waiting for Xueqing to say this. However, he still raised his brows and pretended to be puzzled. "Yes, what's wrong?" Xueqing smiled and said, "Now that Sky Patrol City is surrounded by enemy cultivators, these cultivator aristocratic families naturally have to contribute to the defense of Sky Patrol City, since they're in Sky Patrol City. Besides Yi Jianyu, there are other Dao sect cultivators in Sky Patrol City, right? Ask them to come out and defend against the enemy with us sword cultivators." "Forget it." Yi Guxing waved his hand and said, "There aren't many Dao sect disciples. How can they contribute when they see Dao sect disciples besieging the city? They'll only add to the chaos." "I want them to add to the chaos." Xueqing's eyes revealed a murderous glint. "They're all Dao sect cultivators anyway. Kill as many as you can." Yi Shixiang hurriedly called out, Senior Xue, Dao sect cultivators are different from each other. Please don't treat them the same." Yi Guxing smiled and waved his hand. "Nephew Yi, go take a look. Sword Lord Xue was just joking. Don't mind him." Yi Shixiang thought for a moment and smiled. "Actually, Senior Xue is right. How about this? Our Yi clan has formed an alliance with the 4 aristocratic families of the 3 kingdoms. Since we're in an alliance, they should face the enemy with us. When I send my disciples back, ask them to come out as well. It'll be a good opportunity to test the alliance we've just formed." Xueqing clapped his hands and said, That's right. Since we're allies, we should live and die together. This is a rare opportunity to test us." Yi Guxing didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Yi Shixiang, then at Zhuanghong. Zhuanghong didn't say anything, so he could only wave his hand again and said, "Do as you wish." "Junior understands." Yi Shixiang instructed a few of his disciples. The few disciples activated their sword lights and left. Just as Yi Shixiang was about to leave with his disciples, swish swish swish. A series of sword cries flew back from the surroundings of the Sky Patrol City. Needless to say, it was the news from the patrolling disciples that Ping sent out earlier. Xuecheng was already impatient. Without waiting for the flying swords, he raised his right hand and slapped a huge bear paw light shadow on a messenger flying sword several hundred feet away. Clang! The flying sword vibrated and an anxious voice came from it. Reporting to Sword Lord Yi, we've discovered more than 40,000 disciples of Yuanfeng Stockade in the southeast of Sky Patrol City. Yuanfeng Stockade? Yi Shixiang was stunned. He looked at Xuecheng and asked curiously, "Which Dao sect is that?" "This is my Sky Patrol City's secret. Why are you asking about it?" Xuecheng reprimanded. Yi Shixiang shrugged and waved his hand at his disciples. "Disciples, follow this young master to scout the enemy's situation." "Yes." The Yi family's disciples answered in unison, loud and clear. Reporting to Sword Lord Xue, we've discovered more than 60,000 Fortune Gates disciples in the Sky Patrol City. Before Yi Shixiang could fly too far, Zhuanghong opened another flying sword messenger, and a patrolling disciple's voice came from it. Yi Shixiang didn't turn around, but there was a trace of a smile on his face as he flew closer to the Sky Patrol City's sword formation and looked outside the city. At this time, there were still no signs of Fortune Gate's disciples outside the city. There was only a vast expanse of snow, and the vicissitudes of life everywhere. Behind Yi Shixiang, flying sword messengers continued to fly back and forth, and the patrolling disciples' reports came one after another. Discovered more than 90,000 Heaven-Vying Towers disciples in the east of Sky Patrol City. Discovered more than 30,000 Cloud Pavilion Forts disciples in the northeast of Sky Patrol City. Discovered more than 40,000 unknown sword cultivators in the north of Sky Patrol City. After about half a cup of tea's time, these flying sword messengers slowly disappeared like moths to a flame. Yi Guxing, Zhuanghong, and Xuecheng looked at each other. There was nothing unusual on their faces, but there was fear in their eyes. The scene of Crane King's bloodlife feather-shattering appeared in their eyes. They knew very well that these hundreds of thousands of Fortune Gates disciples were merely the tip of the iceberg. Under the surface of the iceberg, there was a huge hand that could kill them and break through Sky Patrol City. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian, vote for it, vote for it, vote for it, give it a tip, and thanks to fellow Taoists like Benbin, Hooligan Hero, Kai Kai in the Rain, Lonely Asylum, Theblisky One, and other fellow Taoists like Yong Chong, Redfire, Heaven-Defying Radish, Tao Master, Deep Breath, Ferlin, and other fellow Taoists like Benbin, Rogue Hero, Kai Kai in the Rain, Lonely Asylum, and other fellow Taoists like Yong Chong, Redfire, Heaven-Defying Radish, Tao Master, Deep Breath, Ferlin, and other fellow Taoists like Yong Chong, Redfire, Heaven-Defying Radish, Tao Master, Deep Breath, and Ferlin for their tips. Chapter 5176. Senior Yi. Yi Shixiang's voice could be heard. Junior has seen that the sword formation of our Sky Patrol City is impenetrable. It's not something an ordinary disciple can break through. However, Junior has a suggestion, but I don't know if I should say it. If you have something to say it quickly. Xuecheng was a little annoyed and scolded as if Yi Shixiang wasn't a second-grade sword transformation realm sword cultivator. Yi Shixiang was flying over excitedly, but when he heard Xuecheng's words, he froze and looked at Xuecheng coldly. Xuecheng, I respect you as the sword master of Sky Patrol City and a famous sword cultivator in the Quilted Mountain sect. Of course, it's also because my family's patriarch specially instructed me to call myself Junior. Don't be so shameless. Do you believe that this Yi won't wait for these Fortune Gates disciples to come closer? This Yi will kill you in front of the Sky Patrol City right now. Yi Shixiang's expression changed and Xuecheng was stunned. He suddenly realized that this sword cultivator who called himself Junior was a second-grade sword transformation realm sword cultivator. How could he scold him just because he was depressed? Although Xuecheng's face had grown a lot of white mane due to his fusion with the spirit beast, His expression couldn't be seen. However, with his huge body and stiff body, who wouldn't know the awkwardness in his heart? Yi Guxing hurriedly smiled to smooth things over. Nephew Yi, please don't be offended. Sword friend Shui was also very anxious when he saw that our Sky Patrol city was surrounded. Didn't you just ask him what broke in his hand? To be honest, that was the lifeblood feather of our quilted mountain sex Hejun. Before you came, Hejun was ordered to break out and report to the Huan country. However, he was killed in less than half a cup of tea's time. Hejun was the general of our Sky Patrol city. His strength might not be as good as Meng Peng, but in terms of escaping and flying, no one in our Sky Patrol city can compare to him. Yi Shixiang took the opportunity to suck in a breath of cold air, and retracted his gaze from Shuecheng. He took the opportunity to ask, the situation is so serious? This is out of Junior's expectations. Junior has seen General Hejun before. Even he couldn't break out. It seems like we can only fight with our backs against the wall? Zhuang Hong hurriedly said. That's right, Nephew Yi is right. We must work together to get through this crisis. Zhuang Hong then paused for a moment and said meaningfully, Nephew Yi, since you've already broken out the fortune gate, I presume you already know who is besieging our Heavenly Patrol city? Do you have a good plan? Yi Shixiang shook his head slightly and said, Junior did have some thoughts before, but those thoughts were based on the fact that Wei Cheng is a fortune gate disciple. Now that I've heard that there's actually a Taoist grandmaster who could easily kill Crane Lord here, I suddenly feel that things aren't as simple as they seem. My thoughts are really superficial. Yi Guxing's yes sexy, Si and Yi Yi Ye's sect, as sex yes Yi. Yi, as long as, Yi Shuez Yi. Yi Shixiang pondered for a moment before pointing at the sword formation and said, although the Heavenly Patrol city's sword formation is impregnable, Senior Yi, don't forget that we sword cultivators are best at attacking. When there were Dao cultivators guarding the Heavenly Patrol city, they could use the formation to defend, but we sword cultivators can't. We sword cultivators must attack. Even if we fail to attack, the Heavenly Patrol city's sword formation can only be the last line of defense. We can't put the sword formation in front of us and hide behind it. That's right. Shuecheng also clapped his hands and praised, Sword friend Yi is right. The strongest defense is offense. I also suggest that we release the sword formation, and let our Heavenly Patrol city's swordsmen kill the Dao cultivators outside the sword formation. Since the Fortune Gate's disciples are here, let's let them have a taste of the power of our flying swords. Yi Guxing looked at Zhuang Hong, and both of them exchanged glances. He nodded and said, Nephew Yi is right. While we defend the Heavenly Patrol city's sword formation, we must take the initiative to attack and seize the initiative of the battle. I volunteer. Zhuang Hong raised his hand and said, I'll lead my Flying Feather Sect's disciples to guard the west gate of the Heavenly Patrol city and kill the Fortune Gate's disciples. I'll guard the north gate of the Heavenly Patrol city, Shuecheng hurriedly said. Yi Guxing smiled and nodded. He looked at Yi Shixiang and said, Nephew Yi, there may be other sword transformation swordsmen in the Heavenly Patrol city, but no matter how strong they are, I can't entrust them to me. Therefore, I hope that your Yi clan can also take on the responsibility of guarding the Heavenly Patrol city. Yi Shixiang hesitated for a moment and nodded solemnly. If that's the case, Junior Yi Shixiang swears to the heavens that I won't disappoint Senior Yi. Nephew Yi, you don't have to do this. Yi Guxing felt more assured after hearing Yi Shixiang's oath. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, I've already said that I believe you. Which direction do you want to guard? Junior. Yi Shixiang was about to speak, but when he looked up he saw Fairy Hong Xia and the others flying over. He rolled his eyes and hurriedly said in a low voice, Since I've invited the Dao Cultivator's disciples to help, I can't let them fight the Fortune Gate's disciples. How about this? I'll lead the Yi clan's disciples and the 4 Dao Cultivators' disciples to the north gate of the Heavenly Patrol city. Shuecheng frowned, but he immediately understood. The north gate of the Heavenly Patrol city was besieged by the Fortune Gate's disciples. Yi Shixiang was not targeting him. He nodded and said, If that's the case, I'll guard the south gate of the Heavenly Patrol city. Yi Guxing was not in a hurry to answer. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Fairy Hongxia and the others who were flying over and said, Nephew Yi, who are these disciples? Luyang's Kai clan, Su Yenyun's clan, Fallen Gold Mountains Yu clan, and Tianmen Mountains Huang clan. Yi Shixiang did not hide anything and answered truthfully. Yi Guxing nodded. They're not big families. I'm sure Nephew Yi can control them well. Don't worry, Senior Yi. Yi Shixiang said indifferently. Junior wouldn't have dared to speak if I wasn't confident. They're just a few golden core cultivators. Senior Yi doesn't care about them, right? Hee hee, if that's the case, I'll leave the north gate of the Heavenly Patrol City to Nephew Yi. Yi Guxing smiled and said meaningfully. I'll guard the west gate of the Heavenly Patrol City. I'd like to see who's the mastermind behind the Fortune Gate. Let's go. Yi Shixiang did not delay, he raised his hand and ordered. Yi clan's disciples, follow me to the north gate. Wait. Seeing that Yi Shixiang was about to leave, Yi Guxing hurriedly stopped him and said, Nephew Yi, you haven't received my Heavenly Patrol City's City Lord token. How can you guard the north gate of the Heavenly Patrol City? Yi Shixiang scratched his head awkwardly and said with a smile. Junior was impulsive and forgot about this matter. Sword Master, please give me the order. Good. Yi Guxing was even more relieved. He raised his hand and took out another small golden sword and handed it to Yi Shixiang. Yi Shixiang, I order you to guard the north gate of the Heavenly Patrol City, and take my place as the Sword Master. Yes, Junior will obey. Yi Shixiang put away his embarrassment and respectfully accepted the City Lord token. He led the Yi clan's disciples and flew to the north gate of the Heavenly Patrol City. At this time, Fairy Hongxia and the other Yi clan's disciples came to greet them. Before Fairy Hongxia could speak, Xiao Mao, who was beside her, hurriedly asked, Young Master, what happened? I heard that someone has surrounded the Heavenly Patrol City. Yi Shixiang smiled and said, Don't worry, it's not a Dao sword battle. If it was a Dao sword battle, how could you all be standing here? I've just found out that the east, west, and south gate of the Heavenly Patrol City are filled with Dao Cultivator disciples, but the north gate is filled with Sword Cultivator disciples. I'm guessing that some cultivators who have a grudge against the Mountain Patrol Sword Sect, Soaring Feather Sect, and Quilted Mountain Sect have surrounded the Heavenly Patrol City to cause trouble. Then what should we do? Fairy Hongxia frowned and said, Although it's not a Dao sword battle, we're Dao Cultivator disciples. Now that we're in the Heavenly Patrol City, it's not good. Fairy, don't worry. Yi Shixiang looked at Fairy Hongxia and said, Even if I'm injured, I won't let you lose a single hair. I've already volunteered to guard the north gate of the Heavenly Patrol City. We'll go out and set up a formation to fight against the unknown sword cultivators. Then take advantage of the chaos. Fairy and the rest can leave first. Oh, right, the number of sword cultivators in the north gate of the Heavenly Patrol City has decreased by a lot. All right. Fairy Hongxia was confused. At this time, she could only look at Xiao Mao, who was also confused, and nodded. Then we'll listen to young Master Ye's arrangements. Young Master Yi. While they were talking, Yun Jiecheng flew over from another direction in a hurry. Before he got close, he shouted loudly, What's going on? Is it another Dao sword battle? Yi Shixiang's face showed a trace of awkwardness. He ignored Yun Jiecheng and turned to Fairy Hongxia and said, Fairy, I can't help it. This is all my family's old man's arrangement. It's okay. Fairy Hongxia was already prepared. With a faint carefree expression, she said, Both our families have the right to choose. Patriarch Yin. Yi Shixiang nodded at Fairy Hongxia apologetically. Then he flew up and said to Yun Jiecheng, I don't know the details of the situation. I've already taken the Sword Master's token arrow. It won't be too late for us to go to the north gate of the Heavenly Patrol City first. Young Master Yi. Young Master Yi. Almost at the same time, from the other two sides, a male cultivator who looked as proud as a pine tree and a young and beautiful woman who was as young and beautiful as the morning sun, spoke. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, bookmark it, and reward it. Thank you for all forms of support. Thanks to fellow Taoists like Benben, Rogue Hero, Kai Kai in the Rain, Lonely Asylum, Theblisky One, Yong Chong, Honghua, heaven-defying radish, Dao Master, deep breath, and Ferlin for their rewards. Today, I'll add more chapters for all of you. At the same time, I'd like to thank everyone who follows the path of spirit cultivation. Fellow Taoists' strong support and tireless reading gave me the strength to write. Chapter 5177. Seeing this, Yi Shixiang became even more embarrassed. He rubbed his nose, looked at Fairy Hongxia, then looked at Yun Guichong and said, "Please wait a moment, these are the other two cultivation families." Without waiting for Yi Shixiang to finish his words, the beautiful woman exuding a fiery aura immediately called out, Fairy Hongxia, why are you here?" "You are?" Fairy Hongxia asked curiously as she looked at this woman who was only at the Golden Core advanced stage. However, her beauty was not inferior to her own. Seeing that Fairy Hongxia did not recognize her, the female cultivator raised her eyebrows and was somewhat unhappy. Her cherry-red lips curled as she said, "I am Huang Mingxiang, the head of Tianmen Mountain's Huang clan." Huang Mingxiang? The more Fairy Hongxia heard, the more confused she became. She thought for a moment, but could not think of any entanglements between her and Tianmen Mountain's Huang clan. However, she still cupped her hands and said, "So it's Taoist Huang, I greet you." "Greetings, greetings." Huang Mingxiang did not have the awareness of meeting a nascent soul senior. It was as if Fairy Hongxia was his enemy, and casually cupped his hands as a form of greeting. Fairy Hongxia was very attentive. She looked around and saw that only she and Huang Mengxiang were female cultivators. She laughed and said, "It seems like Taoist Huang doesn't like me. I don't know if it's because my Kai clan offended Tianmen Mountain, or because my Huanhua sect disturbed Tianmen Mountain. No matter who it is, I will apologize on their behalf. It's their fault for making a beauty like you angry." Huang Mingxiang was an extrovert, so when she heard Fairy Hongxia praising her beauty, she smiled and flew in front of Fairy Hongxia and said, "How can this concubine compare to Big Sister Ah? You are the most beautiful female cultivator in my country of Shi." Sweat. Not to mention the others, Xiao Mao's forehead was covered in sweat. For some reason, he suddenly thought of his Taoist companion, Qin Jian, who always liked to let him praise her beauty. Not to mention the two beautiful women chattering. Yi Shixiang hurriedly greeted the other man and cupped his hands. "I'm sorry, Taoist you, I've startled you." "Yutong?" Before the man could speak, surprise flashed in Yun Jiechong's eyes as he cried out, "You? Why are you here?" After he finished speaking, Yun Jiechong looked thoughtfully at Yi Shixiang and sneered, "Young Lord Yi, your appetite is really not small, ah." Previously, this Yun thought that only Luyang's Kai family and Yi family were discussing an alliance. Who would have thought that the Yu family of Fallen Gold Mountain was also involved? The one that I don't recognize is actually also from the Huang family of the Heavenly Gate Mountain in the country of Shi. Heh. Yi Shixiang smiled and said to Yutong and Yun Jiechong, who were already standing in front of him, "Everyone here is an elite from the aristocratic families of the Three Kingdoms. If it was before, your four clans might not have thought of forming an alliance, let alone sitting together to discuss the details. And now, with my Yi clan as the middleman, the four clans may not have formed an alliance with my Yi clan yet. But from the current situation, the possibility of an alliance is extremely high. Since my Yi clan has formed an alliance with your four clans, why can't our five clans form an even bigger alliance? I won't hide it from everyone. My Yi clan's patriarch has already vaguely revealed that he will continue to push this alliance forward. With our five clans as the core, he will attract even more aristocratic families of Dao and sword cultivators. In the end, we will form the largest alliance in Donrain continent." Hiss. Yin Jiechong knew that Yi Shixiang was lying, but he still couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The weeds in his heart also grew wildly. He couldn't help but look at Yutong. However, the moment his gaze landed on Yutong, he was immediately pierced back by Yutong's all-like gaze. Yin Jiechong was startled and quickly swept his gaze over. Sure enough, Yi Shixiang was looking at him meaningfully as if he wanted to see something from his eyes. Damn it. Yin Jiechong cursed in a low voice. This Yi Shixiang is truly sinister. He doesn't know who is behind this Yin. It seems like he wants to use words to force this Yun to reveal a flaw. This Yun almost exposed myself just now. Cough cough. Yu Tong coughed lightly and said calmly, Young Lord Yi, this matter is too important and far exceeds this Yu's expectations. Of course, since we've already come this far, it's not impossible to take another step forward. However, no matter what, it's not too late to talk about this after we've overcome today's crisis, right? This you heard that Sky Patrol City has already been surrounded by many cultivators. At this point, Yu Tong didn't say anything else. He only looked at Yi Shixiang and quietly waited for him to speak. Yi Shixiang sneered in his heart as he looked at Yu Tong. He understood that Yu Tong was the person that Yun Jiecheng mentioned. As the Yi clan's young lord, Yi Shixiang didn't know, but as the Yi clan's patriarch, Yi Yaotian, he knew very well. He also knew that the reason why Yu Tong cooperated with him, and the reason why the immortal emissary behind Yu Tong chose him wasn't only because the emissary might know about the Yi clan's background, but also because he could complete the mission that they couldn't in Sky Patrol City. Unfortunately, until now Yi Yaotian, who was pretending to be Yi Shixiang, still didn't know where the emissary was, nor did he know what the emissary's objective was. However, Yi Shixiang knew that the emissary had endless means and he couldn't ruin the emissary's plans. He could only seek the greatest benefits in this crack. Therefore, Yi Shixiang smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Yu, please forgive me for this matter. It's too sudden and I've only just found out. However, I've already obtained the Swordmaster token from the 3 Swordmasters in Sky Patrol City. I'm going to bring my Yi clan's disciples to set up a sword formation outside Sky Patrol City, to fight the invading sword cultivators to the death. If fellow Taoist Yu is willing, I welcome the Yu clan's disciples from Fallen Gold Mountain to fight the enemy together. This. Yu Tong was overjoyed, but he revealed a hesitant expression. He turned around for a moment and then nodded. Since we're already on the same boat, even if my Yu clan wants to retreat, I'm afraid it won't work, right? Haha. Yi Shixiang clapped and laughed. Fellow Taoist Yu is indeed a forthright cultivator. This Yi is very gratified to be able to get to know someone like you. Since fellow Taoist Yu is giving me face, this Yi will agree to the conditions you mentioned earlier on behalf of my family head. Many thanks. Yu Tong's joy didn't show on his face as he said indifferently and raised his hand. This Yi will represent my Yu clan and form an alliance with the Yi clan to fight the enemy together. Exactly. Yi Shixiang didn't hesitate to raise his hand and hit Yu Tong's hand as he shouted. Only true allies who have gone through the test of blood and fire. This Yi will never forget being able to form an alliance with fellow Taoist Yu under such circumstances. Good. Yun Jicheng also pretended to have his blood boiling as he raised his hand and said, This Yun is also willing to form an alliance with the Yi clan on behalf of my Yun clan. Great. Yi Shixiang immediately raised his other hand and said, Fellow Taoist Yun, just based on these words of yours, my Yi clan will agree to all the conditions you mentioned earlier. Come, let us form an alliance. Pa. With a soft sound, the seemingly sincere alliance was finally formed. But in reality, it wasn't even a superficial alliance. Then, the 3 of them looked at Fairy Red Dawn and Huang Mingxiang. Big sister. Huang Mingxiang's eyes were filled with passion and excitement. She looked at Fairy Hongxia and said, How about we form an alliance as well? Fairy Hongxia pondered for a moment before smiling and nodding. Since that's the case, as you wish. As she spoke, she also raised her jade-like hand. Pa. Huang Mingxiang unrestrainedly slapped Fairy Hongxia's hand and said with a smile, My Tianmen Mountain's Huang family will form an alliance with Liang's Kai family. Soon after, Huang Mingxiang glanced at Yi Shixiang and the others and said, Young Master Yi, I also agree to form an alliance. Where is your sincerity? Oh. Yi Shixiang blinked his eyes and retracted his hand. He lowered his head and looked at it seriously before saying self-mockingly, Since we're forming an alliance, why don't we strike our palms to make an oath? Humph. Huang Mingxiang snorted coldly and said, Don't think of taking advantage of us. Haha. Yi Shixiang laughed loudly and said, This Yi is just joking with fellow Taoist Huang. Since fellow Taoist Huang and Fairy Hongxia are willing to form an alliance with my Yi clan, My Yi clan will also agree to all the conditions you mentioned earlier. That's more like it. Huang Mingxiang's large eyes were like fine wine that had been brewed for 100 years. Anyone who saw it would be intoxicated, she said with a smile. Such forthrightness is what a great man should be like. Now you can be considered as a small half of a male cultivator that can enter my eyes. Oh. Yi Shixiang smiled bitterly and said curiously, this you will probably be punished by the Yi clan's patriarch for giving in like this. This is only a small half of a male cultivator in your eyes. Then what is a male cultivator that can enter your eyes like? In this world. Huang Mingxiang's eyes flitted past Fairy Hongxia and paused for a moment. Then, she looked towards the horizon and muttered, I'm afraid there's no longer a man as imposing as him. Thump. An indescribable feeling emerged from Fairy Hongxia's heart. Fairy Hongxia suddenly understood why Huang Mingxiang recognized her the moment they met. Moreover, under the seemingly harmonious atmosphere, there was also a volcanic jealousy. Of course, this was only Fairy Hongxia's feeling. Yi Shixiang asked with interest, Io, who is this man? Will this ye be fortunate enough to know? Hee, I won't tell you. Suddenly, the yearning expression on Huang Mingxiang's face disappeared like the wind. A charming smile appeared on her face and she said, I'll let you guess with all your might. Vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, bookmark it, tip it. Thank you for all forms of support. Thanks to fellow Taoists like Benben, Rogue Hero, Kai Kai in the Rain, Lonely Asylum, Thebluski One, Yongchang, Red Fire, Heaven Defying Radish, Dao Sovereign, Deep Breath, Ferlin, Suji, and other fellow Taoists for their tips. Today, I'll add more chapters for you. At the same time, I'd like to thank everyone who follows the path of spirit cultivation. Fellow Taoists' great support and tireless reading gave me the strength to write. Chapter 5178. With that, Huang Mingxiang pulled Fairy Hongxia's hand and said with a smile, Let's go, sister. Let's lead the disciples to defend against the enemy. I'd like to see which sword cultivator is so bold to attack my Sky Patrol city. All right. Fairy Hongxia looked at Huang Mingxiang's carefree manner and secretly scolded herself for being suspicious. She smiled and said, Sister will fight a bloody battle with you today. Then, Fairy Hongxia and Huang Mingxiang led the few disciples from the Kai and Huang clan to the north gate of Sky Patrol City. Yi Shixiang and Yin Guichong looked at each other with smiles on their faces. Yi Shixiang stole a glance at Yutong. Although Yutong was facing the direction where Fairy Hongxia and the rest disappeared, his lips were moving slightly as if he was transmitting a message. Yi Shixiang reminded him, Fellow Taoist Yu, Fairy Hongxia and fellow Taoist Huang have already left. This is what it means to be a woman who is not inferior to a man. We can't let others look down on us. Yutong stopped transmitting his message and looked at Yi Shixiang with a smile. Fellow Taoist Yun and I have to work hard. We can't even compare to that small half. Ha ha. Yi Shixiang laughed even louder. He moved his body and chased after Fairy Hongxia while shouting, Yes, you have to work hard. Fellow Taoist you please. Yin Guichong raised his hand and invited Yutong to go first. Yutong smiled and said, Let's go together. All right. Yin Guichong nodded. The two of them also led their disciples and followed behind Yi Shixiang. After the Yin and Yu clan disciples left, the other Yi clan disciples followed behind. With the Sword Master token, Yi Shixiang could easily control the sword cultivators at the north gate of Sky Patrol City. He first understood the specific situation and said to the sword cultivator guarding the north gate of Sky Patrol City, Sword Master Yi thinks highly of me and I've accepted the task of guarding the north gate of Sky Patrol City. But don't worry, I know my limits and will definitely not interfere with your defensive sword formation. I just want you to hand over the swordsmen outside the defensive sword formation to me. I'll lead them to set up the formation outside Sky Patrol City and have a life-and-death battle with the enemy cultivators surrounding the city. The patrolling sword sect's disciple guarding the northern gate was even more straightforward and nimble. After hearing Yi Shixiang's words, he immediately sent out the order. Approximately several thousand sword cultivators flew over from various places to await Yi Shixiang's orders. Of course, Yi Shixiang knew that the north side of Sky Patrol City would not only have a few sword cultivators, but he did not ask too much. He also led the thousands of sword cultivators and Yi clan disciples out of Sky Patrol City. After flying for more than 10 miles, and seeing that they were about to pass by several mountain peaks, Yin Jiecheng hurriedly transmitted a message to Yi Shixiang to stop. Yi Shixiang looked meaningfully at the mountains below him that looked like monsters that were accumulating power. A faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He stopped and ordered everyone to stop as well. Everyone. Yi Shixiang pretended to release his divine sense and looked around before he said, "My celestial city is easy to defend and hard to attack. During the Great Sword Dao War back then, my sword cultivators spent a lot of effort to take over Celestial City. So today, if we were in your shoes, we definitely can't let the same thing happen again. We must kill the enemy outside the sword formation." Young Lord Yi, the leader of the sword cultivators, hesitated for a moment before he said, "I don't know if you've received the message, but there are probably hundreds of thousands of enemy cultivators outside the northern gate of Sky Patrol City. We're only several thousand sword cultivators. How can we be their match? 10 million ants are coming to ambush Sky Patrol City. Will you be afraid?" Yi Shixiang glanced at the sword cultivator and asked. The sword cultivator was stunned and shook his head. "I won't be afraid even if there are 10 times more ants, let alone 10 million. Will you be afraid if there are 1,000,000 sword cultivators?" Yi Shixiang continued to ask. "A million?" The sword cultivator hesitated for a moment before he answered. "Although I feel that I can definitely kill my way out of 1,000,000 sword cultivators, 1,000,000 is too many. I dare not estimate." "What if we accompany you to face 1,000,000 sword cultivators?" Yi Shixiang asked loudly. "I'm not afraid." The sword cultivator suddenly understood something and shouted back. "If young lord and all of you are here, how can I be afraid?" "That's right." Yi Shixiang raised his hand and pointed into the distance. "I'm not afraid to tell you that the sword cultivators approaching from there are at most at the level of drawing sword. No matter how many of them there are, how can they break through Sky Patrol City? I'm still young and have many pleasures to enjoy. If it's dangerous to come out of Sky Patrol City, how can I risk my life to come out? Don't worry, I have my Yi clan's secret sword formation here. You just have to follow the sword formation and wait to kill the enemy cultivators and perform meritorious deeds for Sky Patrol City, right?" "Haha, great." The sword cultivator was overjoyed and cupped his hands. "We'll be counting on you, young lord." "Well said." Yi Shixiang nodded and took out a dozen jade slips and handed them to the sword cultivator. "This is the method to set up the formation. Fellow Taoist, please distribute it to the team leaders. We'll quickly study it and prepare to set up the formation." Although Yi Shixiang's words were very encouraging, the Sky Patrol Sword Sect's disciples did not fully believe him. However, since Yi Shixiang, as the Yi clan's young lord, was going to face the enemy cultivators here, they had no reason to not come. Moreover, they believed Yi Shixiang's words. The enemy cultivators must be low-level disciples. Otherwise, it would be impossible for there to be such a shocking number. While the group of sword cultivators were studying the sword formation, Yi Shixiang also gave a few jade slips to Fairy Hongxia, Huang Mengxiang, Yutong, Yin Jicheng, and the others. After a meal, everyone finished reading. Yi Shixiang said in a low voice, "Everyone, this formation is divided into 2 layers. The inner and outer formation. We have fewer people, so we'll gather in the inner formation. The sword cultivators of Sky Patrol City will be scattered in the outer formation. Of course, the number of sword cultivators in the inner formation cannot be too small. We need to draw out nearly 1,000 sword cultivators from Sky Patrol City and transfer them into the inner formation. However, these sword cultivators cannot be led by us. They must be led by the patriarchs. Firstly, it can increase the power of the inner formation. Secondly, it can protect the patriarchs. What do you all think?" At this point, Yi Shixiang hesitated for a moment. He flicked his 10 fingers and a simple sword formation was set up. Yi Shixiang hurriedly said, "Most importantly, if there's an opportunity during the battle, you all can mobilize these sword cultivators to face the enemy cultivators. Let them hold the enemy cultivators back while you all can easily escape. Young Lord Yi. Huang Mingxiang's eyes were filled with surprise as he cried out. You really move me. If I didn't have someone else in my heart, I would definitely treat you as my ideal Dao companion. Fairy Hongxia's heart shuddered for no reason. Yi Shixiang also didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he waved his hand and said, Forget it. I'll just be the shorty in your eyes. I already have someone in my heart. As he spoke, Yi Shixiang actually glanced at Fairy Hongxia without any scruples. Fairy Hongxia was a little distracted and didn't seem to notice it. On the contrary, when Xiao Mao saw the desire in Yi Shixiang's eyes, he couldn't help but be alarmed and secretly knew that things weren't looking good. Thank goodness, thank goodness. Huang Mingxiang clapped his hands in relief and said, I didn't hurt anyone. Yi Shixiang shook his head helplessly and removed the simple and crude sword formation. He said, I believe everyone has already seen the sword formation. Now, I will be bold enough to assign the locations that the patriarchs will guard. Yutong nodded and said, Young Lord Yi, please. After all, this is the Yi clan's sword formation. Yes, young Lord Yi, please quickly say it. Huang Mingxiang's voice was so sweet that it made Yi Shixiang's hair stand on end. Yi Shixiang perked up and pointed out the details of the sword formation and the locations that the 5 patriarchs will guard. Finally, he specially looked at Yun Guichong and said, Fellow Taoist Yun, is there anything you don't understand? Everything that Yi Shixiang said was naturally taught by Yun Guichong. How could he have any doubts? However, Yun Guichong still pretended to ask a few questions. Then Yi Shixiang looked at Yutong and said meaningfully, Fellow Taoist Yu, is there anything else you want to ask? When Yutong saw that Yi Shixiang immediately asked him after Yun Guichong, he already had some understanding in his heart. He smiled and said, I don't have any special questions. However, when I look at this sword formation, the entire formation looks like a plum blossom in the snow with 5 petals. These 5 petals floating in the air will certainly be beautiful, but if it's used to kill enemies, it will appear to have no foundation. I wonder where the center of this sword formation will be located? Yi Shixiang pretended to be astonished and looked at Yutong. He gave him a thumbs up and said, I really didn't expect fellow Taoist you to be a formation expert. When ordinary sword cultivators see my Yi clan sword formation, they would think that these 5 sword petals are 5 different formation cores. They can't tell at all. Since it's shaped like a plum blossom, it should have a root. As he spoke, Yi Shixiang pointed at a mountain peak not far away and said with a smile, That place. I've already looked at it earlier. That place is the best place to be the foundation of the sword formation. When Yun Guichong heard this, he revealed a faint smile. That mountain peak was where he and Yutong had deliberately set up the 4-spirit blood curse. Yun Guichong couldn't help but glance at Yutong. Because the materials needed to set up the 4-spirit blood curse were extremely rare, the Yun clan and Yu clan had spent a lot of effort to gather them. As for setting up the formation, although it looked simple, it was troublesome because they didn't know where to set up the formation in order to lure Fairy Hongxia into the formation. Previously, the two of them had also discussed capturing her by force. However, just as Yutong said, that kind of bloodline would be greatly reduced and wouldn't be able to sanctify their bloodline. That was why they chose to cooperate with the Yi clan. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Qidian to subscribe to support, vote for a monthly vote, vote for a recommendation vote, bookmark, tip, and thank you for all forms of support. Thanks to fellow Taoists like Benben, Rogue Hero, Kai Kai in the Rain, Lonely Asylum, Theblisky One, Yong Chong, Honghua, Heaven Defying Radish, Dao Sovereign, Deep Breath, Furlan, Suji, and other fellow Taoists for their tips. Today I'll add more chapters for all of you. At the same time, I'd like to thank everyone who follows the path of spirit cultivation. Fellow Taoists' strong support and tireless reading gave me the strength to write. Chapter 5179. The Sky Patrol City was designated by the Yi clan. Although Yun Guichong did not know why the Yi clan designated the Sky Patrol City, he knew that it was extremely difficult to set up the 4 spirits blood curse under the nose of a sword cultivator outside the Sky Patrol City. He and Yutong looked all around Sky Patrol City, but they did not find a suitable place. The Sky Patrol City was easy to defend and difficult to attack. It was surrounded by snow and abyss, covered with ice and snow. It was not a suitable place to set up the Four Spirits' blood curse. However, just when the two of them were at their wits' end, Yun Jiecheng thought of the Tianyi Cyan Lightsword formation set up by the sword cultivators during the Great War of the Sword Principles. Hence, he whimsically suggested that Yutong explore the vicinity of Sky Inspect City. Sure enough, hard work paid off. They finally found a suitable place outside the north gate of Sky Inspect City. This place was very close to the Sky Patrol City's city wall. It was almost always under the supervision of sword cultivator patrolling disciples. It was extremely difficult to set up the formation. However, Yutong and Yun Guichong were even more excited when they saw this. The more difficult it was, the less likely the Yi clan would find out about their purpose and spoil their plans. Hence, the seemingly simple formation in the end took a lot of effort from Yun Guichong and Yutong. However, Yun Guichong said to himself proudly, "The most difficult part is over. In another 2 hours, the Four Spirits' blood curse can be activated. By then Yutong and I will." When he thought of this, a trace of gloom appeared in Yun Guichong's heart again. He glanced at Yutong. Although he had been very close to Yutong after forming an alliance with him in the Sword Tomb, he had been very close to Yutong. In the next 1,000 years he had also received a lot of guidance from Yutong, and gained a lot of benefits. It could be said that without Yutong, Yun Guichong would not be able to conceive a baby. However, Yun Guichong always had a suspicion that he might be used by Yutong. If that was the case, Yun Guichong had no basis at all. Whether it was setting up the formation or the choice of location, it was all decided by him. He and Yutong set up the formation together. Most of the time, he even set it up himself. Yun Guichong had secretly tried to set up the Four Spirits' blood curse. All the effects were exactly the same as what Yutong said. All the abnormalities of the blood curse were the same as what Yutong said. He had no reason to doubt Yutong. "Let's fight." Yun Guichong secretly clenched his teeth. "This is an opportunity. If I can sanctify the true spirit bloodline to the Holy Spirit bloodline, not only will I be able to achieve the spirit severing stage, but even the fusion stage will not be a dream." While Yun Jiecheng was pondering, Yi Shixiang also asked Fairy Hongxia and Huang Mingxiang. At this moment, the disciples of the mountain patrolling Sword Gate had also flown over. Yi Shixiang explained the reason why the sword cultivators were transferred to the inner formation. The group leaders did not have any objections and respectively sent 300 sword cultivator disciples to the Kai, Yu Yun and Huang families. After all, they also understood the sword array and knew about the inner array. These aristocratic families had too few people. Furthermore, with sword cultivators around these aristocratic families, they could also feel safe. In the end, Yi Shixiang had the demeanor of a great general, and divided the remaining several thousand sword cultivators into 5 groups, which corresponded to the 5 influential families in the inner formation. Woo-woo. Just as Yi Shixiang finished distributing the disciples, he heard a gust of chilly wind mixed with broken sword intent gushing out from the distant horizon. These sword intents broke through the wind and snow and hit the cloudy sky. Not only did hundreds of whirlpools appear in the sky, even the mountain peaks near the Sky Patrolling City trembled slightly. Immediately, in the vast land, layers of sword chi gradually emerged. These sword chi were like waves in the depths of the sea, rising from afar and spreading towards the Sky Patrolling City. In front of these waves, there were dozens or even hundreds of sword cultivators urging their sword lights. They were like seagulls chasing after the tide, soaring wantonly and unyieldingly. Yi Shixiang's gaze swept across and immediately ordered, "Everyone, the enemy cultivators are approaching. The patrolling disciples of the Sky Patrolling City should also return. Let's quickly set up the formation." Yes, thousands of sword cultivators from the Sky Patrolling City, and hundreds of disciples from the 5 influential families, followed the previous discussion and arrangement. They seemed to be in a hurry, but they also flew in an orderly manner. At the same time, in other places of the Sky Patrolling City, more sword cultivator disciples could be seen flying out of the Sky Patrolling City. Just like Yi Shixiang's arrangement, They formed different sword formations. Although these sword formations were not linked together, as the sword intent spread, they had already completely covered the outside of the sky patrolling city. Young lord. Seeing that the sword formation was about to be completed, Xiao Mao suddenly flew over and said in a low voice, I invited Fairy Hongxia here. If anything happens to her in the battle, I won't be able to live with myself. Therefore, I want to go into the Kai family's sword formation. Yi Shixiang was not surprised. He glanced at Xiao Mao and said, I can understand your feelings, but you're not even a nascent soul cultivator. Won't you be causing trouble for them if you go? Whether I can protect her or not is up to me. Xiao Mao replied, but whether I go or not is up to me. Then go. Yi Shixiang waved his hand and said with a smile, I can rest assured if you go and protect Fairy Hongxia. Thank you, young lord. After Xiao Mao expressed his gratitude, he hurriedly left. Yi Shixiang looked at Xiao Mao's back, and a faint smile once again appeared on his lips. In just half a meal's time, the plum blossom-shaped sword formation had already begun to take shape. The sword intent on the inner and outer layers were like plum blossoms in full bloom. One layer after another, it enveloped the surrounding dozens of li and intertwined with the sword intent from other places nearby. Wherever the sword qi covered, the solid ice on the mountain peak began to crack. The previously scattered snowflakes had already disappeared. The sword intent surged into the sky and tore apart the dark clouds bit by bit. Light began to seep through the dark clouds as if the sun would shoot out at any time. Just as everyone was activating the sword qi, Yi Shixiang suddenly frowned and shouted, Not good. Yu Tong and Yin Jiecheng were shocked. They asked almost at the same time, What's wrong? Although this sword formation will increase the stability of the sword formation based on whether it's on the mountain peak, the sword formation is slightly far away from the other sword formations. The sword intent won't be able to integrate well with the sword intent of the other sword formations. It's not good for the defense of Sky Patrol City. Yi Shixiang pretended to be serious as he explained. Damn it. Yu Tong and Yin Jiecheng cursed at the same time. They looked at each other. Yin Jiecheng suppressed the anger in his heart and said softly, According to young lord, how should we deal with it? Yi Shixiang smiled and pointed to a mountain peak at the side. I think that mountain peak is better. Yin Jiecheng's expression changed greatly when he heard this. He looked at Yi Shixiang, who was causing trouble, and gritted his teeth in hatred. Unfortunately, Yi Shixiang was the one in charge of the city lord token now. Moreover, Yi Shixiang was right. When the sword formation was here, there were indeed some sword intents that were fused, and there were many places where the sword intent was thin. Senior Marshal Brother Yu. Yin Jiecheng hurriedly transmitted his voice to ask. Yu Tong bit his lips tightly, and seemed to be at his wit's end. He opened his mouth and wanted to transmit his voice to Yi Shixiang, but he closed his mouth in the end. Yi Yaotian was currently Yi Shixiang. He could do anything he wanted. Even if Immortal Emissary Wen blamed him, Yi Yaotian would push the blame to Yi Shixiang for being insensible. Moreover, Yu Tong really didn't want to ruin his years of hard work. After thinking for a moment, Yu Tong transmitted his voice. Let's see what happens to Yi Shixiang first. We'll adapt according to the situation. That's the only way. Yin Jiecheng was even more furious than Yu Tong, but he also couldn't do anything. Yi Shixiang didn't hide his words from the others, so the other sword cultivators in Sky Patrol City also understood. They didn't have any objections. After Yi Shixiang gave the order, they all flew towards the other mountain peak. The two mountain peaks looked like they were only a few miles apart, but they didn't move an inch. Yin Jiecheng's heart was bleeding. Junior Marshal Brother Yin. Yu Tong's voice suddenly came quietly. Quickly get Yin Xiaoying and 2 or 3 other Yin family disciples to come to this Yu. Ah! Yin Jiecheng was a little stunned. He looked up at Yu Tong, who was not far away from him on his right. At this moment, behind Yu Tong, among the sword cultivators, several Yu family disciples concealed their figures, and were flying towards the Yun family where Yin Jiecheng was. Among these disciples, Yu Yusong could be seen. Although Yin Jiecheng was puzzled, he didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly transmitted his voice. and instructed Yun Xiaoying to bring a few disciples to the sword formation where the Yu family disciples were. Yi Shixiang had long been paying attention to the actions of the Yu family and Yun family. He had already seen the movements of these disciples. However, like Yun Jiechong, he was very puzzled. He didn't know what the exchange of these disciples was for. However, since Yi Shixiang had already violated the agreement, and Yun Jiechong and Yu Tong had responded like this, he couldn't say anything else. Unless he really wanted to fall out with them. Since Yi Shixiang didn't say anything, the other sword cultivators naturally wouldn't care. In just the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the entire sword formation had been transferred to a new mountain peak. At this moment, just as Yi Shixiang had said, the sword intent of the sword formation was intertwined with the sword intent of the other sword formations like water and milk, perfectly protecting Sky Patrol City. As for Yun Jiechong, as his eyes turned rapidly, he quietly activated a trace of the true spirit Dharma body's power. He could vaguely feel the power of the blood curse. Although the power of the blood curse was weaker than before, he was finally relieved. Then he looked at Yu Tong gratefully and transmitted his voice in a low voice. "It's all thanks to senior brother Yu." "Haha, it's nothing." Yu Tong smiled and replied through voice transmission. "I didn't expect the Yi family's young master to change his mind at the last minute. Fortunately, the Ice Phoenix and Vermilion Bird in the Four Spirits blood curse didn't change. It's just that the Silver Tiger and the Flame Dragon swapped places, so the range of the blood curse tilted a little. It's just enough to deal with Yi Shixiang's willfulness. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, bookmark it, and tip it. Thank you for all forms of support. Thank you to Binbin, Hooligan Hero, Kai Kai in the Rain, Lonely Asylum, Theblisky One, and other fellow Taoists for their tips. Yongchong, Honghua, Heaven Defying Radish, Tao Master, Deep Breath, Ferlin, Suji, and other fellow Taoists for their tips. Today I'll add more chapters for you. At the same time, I'd like to thank everyone who follows the path of spirit cultivation. Fellow Taoists, your strong support and tireless reading gave me the strength to write. Chapter 5180. This bastard must be warning us not to mess up his confession to Fairy Hongxia. Yin Guichong looked coldly at Yi Shixiang and said, "I want to see how he's going to suffer." Yu Tong chuckled. "It's already come to this point. Even if he hits a nail on the head, he won't be able to escape from us brothers. Oh right, junior brother Yin, Yu Xiong went to your place, so we'll have to rely on you to activate the Four Spirits blood curse. Be careful when you activate it. Don't be too greedy." Yin Guichong no longer had any doubts and hurriedly replied, "Senior brother Yu, don't worry. It's still the same as what we discussed earlier. Junior brother will take 30% and senior brother will take 70%. Yu Tong sighed. "Fortune makes fools of people. Junior brother has the initiative, so the person activating the blood curse will take at least 40% of the bloodline power. Even if junior brother doesn't agree, the blood curse won't agree. Yin Guichong was overjoyed, but he still spoke with fear and suggested, "How about this, senior brother Yu? Why don't junior brother exchange with you?" Yu Tong frowned and scolded through voice transmission. "Junior brother Yin, you're treating me like an outsider. Yi Shixiang causing trouble is your fortuitous opportunity. If you try your best to make up for it, not only will you lose your fortuitous opportunity, but I will also lose my fortuitous opportunity. Don't say anything more. Wait for me to give you the signal, then activate the Four Spirits blood curse." All right. Yin Guichong knew that he would be unreasonable if he continued to decline, so he agreed through voice transmission. While Yin Guichong was communicating with Yu Tong, the Fortune Gate disciples in the distance had already closed in. Just as Yi Shixiang had said, although there were many Fortune Gate disciples in the Huan country, their strength was weak. Most of them only had nurturing swords and drawing swords, not even an illusory sword could be seen. For a moment, the crowd of sword cultivators calmed down. What are these sword cultivators trying to do? Naturally, Fairy Hongxia had also seen the situation of the Fortune Gate's disciples. She was also very puzzled. After all, She had foolishly followed Yi Shixiang and the others and caused such a huge commotion. She had no reason to fight with these low-level sword cultivators, right? Fairy Hongxia turned to Xiao Mao and asked, "Junior brother Xiao, what is going on?" Of course, Xiao Mao didn't know either. However, he felt uneasy. He reached into his Taoist robe and took out a soul pouch. He said in a low voice, "Senior sister, I'm not sure either. However, I feel that there's something fishy about this." "Nonsense. Do I need you to tell me that? I know that too." Fairy Hongxia glared at him and said, "The expressions of Yi Shixiang and the Sky Patrol city guards didn't seem fake." Fairy Hongxia. Fairy Hongxia. All of a sudden, the Fortune Gate disciples closest to the sword formation were in an uproar. Many of them pointed at Fairy Hongxia and shouted, Quickly report to the gate chief." Immediately after, a few disciples activated their bodies and flew to the south of Sky Patrol City, using either sword lights or flying techniques. Fairy Hongxia was not the only one who was dumbfounded. Even Xiao Mao, who was beside her, and Huang Mengxiang, who was separated by the Yi family, were dumbfounded. Everyone knew that the enemy cultivators besieging the Sky Patrol City must have something to do with Fairy Hongxia. While Fairy Hongxia and the others were dumbfounded, on a mountain peak covered in ice to the south of Sky Patrol City, more than 10 Golden Core cultivators frowned as they looked at the sword formation set up by the Sky Patrol City's swordsmen. They looked at each other, and all of them looked at a third-grade illusory sword cultivator in the middle. This third-grade illusory sword cultivator was none other than Zhong Haoran. Zhong Haoran's wrinkled face did not show any abnormality. He looked at the seemingly sparse sword formation in the distance, and then turned his head to look at the Fortune Gate disciples on his left. A sense of dejection and helplessness rose from the bottom of his heart. His lofty ambitions had long fallen from the 9 layers of clouds to solid ground. "Everyone." Zhong Haoran took a deep breath and looked at the Golden Core sect masters on his left and said, "What do you all think?" Everyone looked at each other and looked at each other. Their hearts were the same as Zhong Haoran's. The sword formation's sword intent was colder than the ice and snow around Sky Patrol City. It had long cooled the fire in their hearts, and even turned it into ice. A few days ago, they were all talking at once, excitedly discussing their dreams and plans. In front of Ru Shi's strength, they had already begun to shatter. They saw the cruel side of reality after all. "Sect Master Wang?" Zhong Haoran's gaze fell on Wang Jianqing of the Chu Hong sect and asked indifferently. That day, Sect Master Wang insisted on tearing apart the Sky Patrol City's defensive sword formation with his peak combat strength. Moreover, we have also agreed that whoever can tear apart the sword formation first will be appointed as the Alliance Master of the Fortune Immortal Alliance. Wang Jianqing was a tall middle-stage gold core cultivator. He was dressed in a sapphire blue military uniform and looked majestic. However, the expression on his face did not match his military uniform. Awkwardness and shock were all over his face. He opened his mouth and said in a low voice, I didn't expect that they would dare to set up a sword formation outside Sky Patrol City, when there are not many sword cultivator disciples in Sky Patrol City. Why is it not possible?" A thin and short middle-stage golden core cultivator immediately said coldly, "That day, I've already said that sword cultivators cultivate an indomitable and unyielding sword intent. How can they hide in the Sky Patrol City and not come out? Even if they give up Sky Patrol City, they will still fight with us." Su Zhonglin. Wang Jianqing was unhappy and growled. "I admit that you said that, but did you insist? Did you have any opinions? All you did was touch your lips and say a few words. Are you trying to claim credit for it now? If you can get the Alliance Master of the Fortune Immortal Alliance with just a few words, we will go back now. Why don't we invite a scholar over?" "Shut up." A bell-like voice exploded in everyone's ears like thunder. Whether it was Wang Jianqing or Su Zhonglin, both shrunk their necks and did not dare to say anything. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice. It was an old man with a head full of white hair. His thick eyebrows were vertical, and his gaze was like lightning as he looked at the two of them. He said, "Since we have already discussed to officially form the Creation Immortal Alliance, no matter who is the leader, we are already allies. Even the word allies has widened the distance between us. We are all from the fortune gate that worships Taoist Xiao as the sect master. We are actually brothers. In this situation, you don't want to join forces to attack the enemy, but you complain about each other. If the disciples hear this, what will they think? Zhong Haoran was not surprised by the old man's reprimand. He had a smile on his face as he looked at the sect master of the Burning Crane Guild named Zhao Ming. Zhao Ming was a late-stage golden core cultivator, and was the strongest among the group of Dao cultivator sect masters. He was also the strongest contender for the position of Fortune Immortal Alliance's chief. Sect Master Zhao. Heavenly Competition Pavilion's Sect Master Zhuahong, an early-stage golden core middle-aged man, said respectfully, "I don't blame you for arguing with each other. Even when I saw the sword cultivator's sword formation, I couldn't help but feel a chill in my heart. I felt that they were unrivaled." After Zhuahong finished speaking, a square-faced middle-aged man also said, "Fellow Taoist Zhuo is right. This Su also feels the same. My fishing island was built relatively late, and this Su doesn't have any special methods. Although the number of people in the sect has increased rapidly in the past few hundred years, compared to these well-trained sword cultivators, this Su feels that." At this point, the middle-aged man didn't continue speaking. Zhao Ming glanced at the slightly elegant middle-aged man and asked indifferently, "Su Cheng, are you trying to say that the disciples of your fishing island are a motley crew compared to these sword cultivators?" Su Cheng's face turned red. He looked at the few cultivators on his left and wanted to deny it. However, he steeled his heart and simply replied, "Reporting to Senior Zhao, this Su indeed has such thoughts. Of course, this is only my opinion of the disciples of my fishing island. It doesn't include all of you." Zhao Ming smiled slightly and said, "This old man has the same thoughts as you. Not only do I feel that the disciples of my Burning Crane Union are a motley crew, but I also feel that all the disciples of the Creation Immortal Alliance are a motley crew." Of course, there were also people like Wu Cheng from the Huitong Pavilion who were unconvinced. However, when they saw that even Zhong Haoran didn't speak, they naturally closed their mouths and listened to Zhao Ming's explanation. Sect Master Zhong. Zhao Ming cupped his hands at Zhong Haoran and said, "Please don't blame this Zhao for being blunt." Zhong Haoran smiled and said, "Sect Master Zhao, you don't have to be like this. This Zhong has already discussed your thoughts with Yun Shu and the others. You can just say it." "Good." Zhao Ming nodded and raised his hand to point at the sword cultivators in the distance and said, "Everyone, what you see is actually not thousands of sword cultivator disciples from the Sky Patrol City. It's actually the foundation of the sword cultivators of the Hung country, for hundreds of thousands of years. The Sword Dao Great War back then wasn't a fierce battle between a few sword sects and a few Dao cultivator sections. In fact, it was a collision between the foundation of our Dao cultivators and the foundation of sword cultivators. How long has it been since our Fortune Gate was founded? It's only been a few hundred years. How can it be a match for the foundation of sword cultivators who have a foundation of 1,000,000 years? Back then, when the Heavenly Demon sect was first founded, their strength far surpassed the Black Heaven sect in the eyes of others. But in the end, didn't they still suffer a crushing defeat? Of course, although the Heavenly Demon sect suffered a crushing defeat, they actually won. Later on, the Heavenly Demon sect on the Dawn Rain continent was unparalleled in the limelight, and directly created the third largest force today. Today, what our Fortune Gate needs to do is to learn from the sword cultivators and the Heavenly Demon sect. We need to grow through battles and experience through blood and fire. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please go to Qidian to subscribe to support, vote for a monthly vote for a recommendation vote, bookmark, reward, and thank you for all forms of support. Thank you to Benben, Rogue Hero, Kai Kai in the Rain, Lonely Asylum, Theblisky One, and other cultivators for taking the lead. Yongchang, Honghua, Heaven-Defying Radish, Dao Sovereign, Deep Breath, Furlan, Suji, and other cultivators for their rewards. Today, I'll add more chapters for all of you. At the same time, I'd also like to thank everyone who follows the path of spirit cultivation. Fellow cultivators' strong support and tireless reading gave me the strength to write. Chapter 5181. The more Xiaoming spoke, the more eloquent he became. Zhong Haoran maintained a smile on his face, but he was getting more and more anxious. He looked to the left and sent a voice transmission to Zhongzhan. Zhongzhan, did you find anything out of place? Zhongzhan had been standing at the back of the group, but when he heard Zhong Haoran's question, he hurriedly replied, reporting to Martial Uncle, I didn't find anything out of place. Moreover, after our discussion, I sent more people to watch the places we passed by to see if there are any ambushes. But until now there has been no news. What about Yinshu? Zhong Haoran glanced at Fei Yinshu on the other side, still asking Zhongzhan through voice transmission. Zhongzhan understood Zhong Haoran's painstaking efforts and smiled. Yinshu has been in contact with me. According to his voice transmission, his disciples also didn't find anything out of place. Even the disciples he sent out on behalf of Martial Uncle didn't find anything out of place. Zhong Haoran sighed. He couldn't help but turn to look at the endless snowfield behind him and said, this old man has tested all the Fortune Gate's gate masters. The first gate master's decree was definitely not issued by any of them. Therefore, there must be someone behind us. What this person wants to do, shouldn't it be obvious by now? But even though we know there are some traps behind us, we can't see anything. Perhaps there is no such person. Zhongzhan replied indifferently. This is merely a desire for power. Didn't you see? During the discussion, all the gate masters were excited, feeling that Martial Uncle's gate master's decree spoke their minds. Everyone wants to turn the Fortune Gate into the #1 sect on the Dawnrain mainland. That's exactly why this old man didn't dare to tell the truth. Zhong Haoran nodded. They have been blinded by their hot-bloodedness. They definitely won't believe it. Who knows, there might be internal strife during the discussion, rather than letting them go to the Sky Patrol City. But the problem is, there's no problem. The most likely scenario is being attacked by sword cultivators. Zhongzhan didn't think much of it. He shrugged and replied, the worst outcome is that our Fortune Gate is being plotted against and destroyed. The current Fortune Immortal Alliance is in a state of disunity, whereas the Fortune Gate in our hearts. If that was the case, he would rather die in glory than live in dishonor. Moreover, with our Fortune Gate's reputation, I'm sure many sects in the Three Kingdoms have already heard of our Fortune Gate's name. They've already sent their disciples to wait in places where we can't detect them, waiting to be fishermen. Hearing this, Zhong Haoran couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He almost cried out involuntarily and looked up at the sword formation in the distance. What happened? He raised his hand and pointed at the sword formation in the distance, as well as the Sky Patrol City that was overflowing with sword chi. He said, but look at the situation in front of you again. How is it what we thought? Not only did the sword shio from Sky Patrol City not send out the illusory sword shio who was guarding the city to shout at us, but they didn't even let us say our purpose of coming here. They immediately sent out a battle formation to meet us. This is obviously a bloody battle. Although we have many disciples in the Fortune Immortal Alliance, how can we be a match for these sword cultivators? Cheng Jizi's words immediately tore apart everyone's pretense of being strong, and everyone fell silent. These words were their true thoughts. What they said earlier about tearing apart the sword formation and fighting a bloody battle with the sword cultivators was just a claptrap. They knew their own strength better than anyone else. The Sky Patrol City was so important. In the Sword Dao War, the sword cultivators only managed to seize the Sky Patrol City in the second stage. Today, the Sky Patrol City seemed unimportant, and the Sword Gate guarding the Sky Patrol City seemed to be one of the three weakest in the Huan country. However, with the strength of the Fortune Immortal Alliance's disciples, it was absolutely impossible to break through the Sky Patrol City. Power and ambition were like rich spiritual wine that made these Fortune Immortal Alliance's sect masters drunk. Only the cold wind of the snowfield and the sharp swords of the sword cultivators could make them drunk. That's true. Zhou Ji of the Yuan Feng Stockade was just an early gold core realm cultivator. He muttered, I thought that when we forced them to the Sky Patrol City, the sword cultivators would come out to ask what happened. We would explain the matter and shout for half a day until Fairy Wuxia and the Yi clan came out to explain the reason. Whether they are real or not, we would return to the Huan country. Seeing that the sect masters had misunderstood his words, Zhong Haoran was angry and anxious. He hurriedly shouted, "Everyone, this old man didn't mean that." What this old man wanted to say was, why didn't the Sky Patrol City receive any news that we were going to besiege them? There must be something fishy. The more Zhong Haoran spoke, the more sweat beaded on his forehead. He could already see the shadow of a large net, covering the Million Fortune Immortal Alliance's disciples, and the Sky Patrol City's sword cultivators. The size of the net was beyond his imagination. "Martial uncle." Zhong Zhan's voice sounded a little desperate. "There's no need to say anything more. The mastermind behind the scenes has covered our eyes and ears, but that's not scary. What's scary is that they even covered the Sky Patrol City's eyes and ears. Not to mention our Fortune Immortal Alliance, even the Dawn Rain Continent's Dao Cultivation sect is no match for such a force." "Shut up." Zhong Haoran was furious and roared, "Isn't this all?" Zhong Haoran wanted to say, "Isn't this all your idea?" However, Zhong Haoran swallowed his words. If Zhong Haoran didn't want to borrow Black Hand's hands to clean up the Fortune Gate and create a unified Fortune Immortal Alliance, how could he send millions of Fortune Gate's disciples to the sword cultivators? How could the whole situation have gone out of control? Zhong Haoran was so angry that he didn't transmit his voice. Hearing this, everyone was stunned and looked at Zhong Haoran in confusion. Only Zhong Zhan bit his lips and lowered his head. The scene after Qin Ji and Zhong Pei escaped that day appeared in front of his eyes. Wasn't it exactly the same as today? Looking at everyone's gaze, Zhong Haoran took a deep breath and opened his mouth. It seemed like he was going to tell them about the fake sect master's token, but the truth was like a boulder stuck in his throat. No matter what, he couldn't spit it out. Right at this time, a sword cultivator in the sword formation closest to Huang Xiaolong's group could no longer hold himself back. He opened his mouth, and a sword cry shook the surroundings. Sword lights that had been accumulating power for a long time rushed towards the Fortune Gate's disciples like a waterfall. Zhong Haoran saw that he couldn't explain, so he immediately made up his mind and made a prompt decision. "Everyone, although we are not from a real sect, we are all Dao Master Zhao's disciples. Since we call ourselves Fortune Immortal Alliance's disciples, we can't belittle ourselves and smear Dao Master Zhao's name. Today, we have already arrived at the gate of Sky Patrol City, so we won't let the sword cultivators of Sky Patrol City and the spectating Dao cultivation sects laugh at us. Come on, take out our flying swords, take out our magic weapons, and fight with the sword cultivators. Use our blood to wash this cold snowfield. Use our blood to carve the 3 words Fortune Immortal Alliance on Sky Patrol City. P.S. Fellow Daoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian. Vote for it, vote for it, vote for it, give it as a reward. And thank you to Benbin, Rogue Hero, Kai Kai in the Rain, Lonely Asylum, Theblisky One, Yong Chong, Honghua, Heaven Defying Radish, Dao Master, Deep Breath, Ferlin, Suji, and other fellow Daoists for their rewards. At the same time, I also want to thank everyone who follows the path of spirit cultivation. Fellow Daoists' strong support and tireless reading gave me the strength to write. Chapter 5182. As soon as Zhong Haoran finished speaking, Zhong Zhan immediately flew up and slapped his palm. A magic artifact shaped like a ruler flew out from the top of his head as he shouted, "For Daoist Xiao, for the Fortune Gate, disciples follow me to the Sky Patrol City." Kill. Fei Yunshu also shouted, "With Daoist Zhao's protection, our Fortune Gate disciples will never be defeated." Kill. Kill. The Fortune Gate disciples' blood boiled when they heard Fei Yunshu's words. They circulated their true qi and true essence, took out their magic artifacts, and pounced on the sword cultivator disciples in the distance. Following Zhong Zhan's order, Zhong Haoran's eyes revealed a hint of sadness. He raised his hand and took out a round plate that was several feet in size. There were many rust spots on the edge of the round plate, and the center of the round plate was covered with runes. as Zhong Haoran spat out a mouthful of sword essence. The round plate glowed with a green sword light. Go. Zhong Haoran growled as his right hand turned into a sword light and struck the round plate. The round plate emitted a metallic sound and soared into the sky. However, it only flew for 100 zhong before it shattered. Thousands of small green swords flew out from the light and pierced towards the sky above the Sky Patrol City. Kill. The small azure sword shot out like a shooting star, covering 1,000 zhong in the blink of an eye, covering the sky above the Sky Patrol City. When the Fortune Gate's disciples around the Sky Patrol City saw the small azure sword, they roared and charged out. Cheng Jizi and the others were stunned. They really did not understand why Zhong Haoran suddenly gave the signal to attack after getting angry. However, when the surrounding disciples started to attack, their misgivings, doubts, and cowardice disappeared like ashes. Cheng Jizi even shouted, "Kill. For Daoist Xiao, for our Fortune Gate. Kill. Disciples kill." Zhao Ming and the others' battle cries were different from the ordinary disciples. Their voices were filled with determination. Although they did not understand the meaning of Zhong Haoran's words, how could they not smell the danger from this strange battle formation? They clearly knew that this should be the last battle of their lives, and also the most magnificent battle. Regardless of victory or defeat, they would definitely not return alive, and their names would definitely be left in the annals of history. Zhong Haoran, who was on the south side of Sky Patrol City, was the first to issue the order to attack. On the north side of Sky Patrol City, Fairy Wuxia, who was in the sword formation, was stunned as she looked at the excited sword cultivator disciples. She did not know what was going on. "Senior sister," Xiao Mao hurriedly asked. "What's going on?" Fairy Wuxia shook her head and said, "How would I know?" As she spoke, Fairy Wuxia looked around and leaped into the sky. She activated her true vitality and shouted, "I, Fairy Wuxia, who are you? Why are you besieging Sky Patrol City?" A group of sword cultivator disciples shouted at the top of their lungs. A 6th-grade swordsman flew out on a sword light and shouted, "Fairy Wuxia, we are Fortune Gate's disciples. We heard that you are going to be engaged to the Yi family's young lord, so we are here to stop you. You are Daoist Zhao's partner. How can you marry someone else?" "Ah?" Fairy Wuxia was even more shocked and shouted, How is this possible? When did I get engaged to Yi Shixiang?" Fairy Wuxia. At this time, nearly 1,000 sword cultivator disciples shouted in unison, "You are Daoist Zhao's partner. How can you marry someone else? We are here to besiege Sky Patrol City to stop the engagement between the Kai family and the Yi family." Along with the loud cry of these over 1,000 sword cultivator disciples, several tens of thousands of sword cultivator disciples in an area of tens of miles around them also activated their sword energies at the same time. Then, a voice that could topple mountains and overturn seas rang out. "Fairy Wuxia, you are Zhenren Zhao's Dao companion. How can you marry into Yi clan? We Fortune Gate's disciples have risked our lives to stop you. Haha." Huang Mingxiang saw the awkward look on Fairy Wuxia's face and covered his mouth with his hand. He laughed heartily and said, "Sister, look at what you've done. You're going to get married soon. How can you still be worthy of brother Xiao?" Xiao Mao was also shocked. He turned to look at the Kai family's disciples and saw that they were also confused. Xiao Mao suddenly came to his senses and quickly looked at the Yi family's disciples who were not too far away from the Kai family's disciples. Boom, boom, boom. Amidst the thunderous roars of the Fortune Gate disciples, a 5-colored sword light soared into the sky from the center of the sword formation. The sword light landed below Fairy Wuxia like a waterfall, and before Fairy Wuxia could do anything, the sword light intertwined with each other. As the sword light surged, tens of thousands of sword flowers bloomed like a spring tide. What was special was that the area several hundred zhong around Fairy Wuxia was enveloped by the sword light, and Fairy Wuxia's pink-robed figure slowly rose up amidst the sword light. This. Fairy Wuxia frowned slightly. Just as she was about to execute a sacred art to shatter the sword light, Yi Shixiang's gentle voice resounded. "Lord Fairy, please wait a moment. This one has something to say." Embarrassment and anger flashed in Fairy Wuxia's eyes. She seemed to have understood something and looked at the tens of thousands of Fortune Gates disciples and thousands of Sword Cultivator disciples. Fairy, please accept this one sincere request. Following Yi Shixiang's words, the flying sword in his hand emitted a fiery red sword light. This sword light was like a spark that lit up Fairy Hongxia's jade-like face. Two faint sparks slowly emerged from Fairy Hongxia's pitch-black eyes. Together. Huang Mengxiang was extremely touched as he shouted loudly. This guy. He really knows how to be pretentious. A rare look of jealousy appeared in Yin Jiecheng's eyes. He originally thought that he was the favored child of the heavens, but in his life, he had met Xiaohua, Fairy Hongxia, Yutong, and now Yi Shixiang. Which one of them was not several times stronger than him? Xiao Mao's heart clenched. Just as he was about to move his body to stop Yi Shixiang, Fairy Hongxia's astonished face suddenly revealed a peerlessly beautiful smile. This smile was like a flower, 100 times more vivid than the resplendent sword light. A faint voice that was neither servile nor overbearing rang out. Young Lord Yi, I think you've made a mistake. However, without waiting for Fairy Hongxia to finish speaking, Yi Shixiang chuckled and said, Lord Fairy, I think you've made a mistake. Yi Shixiang's voice sounded very gentle in the ears of others. However, in Fairy Hongxia's ears, it slowly elongated and was gradually filled with temptation. The fiery red color of the sword light even dyed the surrounding space. Yi Shixiang's face slowly transformed and actually turned into Xiaohua's phoenix eyes. Fairy Hongxia's heart couldn't help but tremble when she saw the Dao companion of her dreams appear. Her eyes were instantly filled with fire. Yi Shixiang continued, Hongxia, don't you want to marry me? Of course. Facing Xiaohua, Fairy Hongxia didn't hesitate and blurted out, fortunately, without waiting for Fairy Hongxia to finish speaking. An earth-shattering fiery light rushed out from under the sword light like a volcanic eruption. The sword light that originally enveloped Fairy Hongxia in layers instantly disappeared like melting blood. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Qidian to subscribe to support, vote for a monthly vote, vote for a recommendation vote, bookmark, tip, and thank you for all forms of support. Thank you to Benbin, Rogue Hero, Kai Kai in the Rain, Lonely Asylum, Theblisky One, and other fellow Taoists for taking the lead, Yongchang, Honghua, Heaven-Defying Radish, Dao Sovereign, Deep Breath, Ferlin, Suji, and other fellow Taoists for their tips. Today, I'll add more chapters for you. At the same time, I'd like to thank every fellow Taoist who follows the path of spirit cultivation. Fellow Taoists' great support and tireless reading gave me the strength to write. Chapter 5183. Kiki. A burst of shrill laughter came from the flames. Following this laughter, the blood vessels of all the cultivators within a few li couldn't help but throb. Fairy Hongxia was no exception. As her blood and qi surged, the fiery red in front of her instantly disappeared. Fairy Hongxia's eyes turned slightly and saw Yi Shixiang's somewhat embarrassed and angry expression. Swoosh! In the soaring flames, a woman that was dozens of meters tall flew out. Wasn't she the drought demon that Xiaohua had met back then? At this moment, the drought demon had already shed her ugliness and was in the form of a charming woman. However, this woman was so valiant. Following the flames, the woman stretched out her arms and stabbed into the sword light that Yi Shixiang had set up with his sword artifact. Kacha! The sword light was annihilated and the sword artifact whimpered. The romantic sea of flowers was completely extinguished. Yi Shixiang. Xiao Mao followed behind the woman and rushed into the sky. He landed beside Fairy Hongxia and roared. What are you doing? Fairy Hongxia hadn't completely woken up earlier. She only completely woke up when Xiao Mao flew out, and the drought demon woman destroyed the illusion. Her eyes were filled with disgust as she floated to Xiao Mao's side and berated. Yi Shixiang, you dare to scheme against I? Ha 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 ha. Seeing that his scheme was ruined, Yi Shixiang first became angry out of humiliation. However, after a moment, he laughed out loud again. Sword light flashed around his body and a second-grade sword transformation realm sword aura soared into the sky, forcing Fairy Hongxia to use her pressure to block it. As for Xiao Mao, he couldn't even breathe under this sword aura. Roar! The drought demon woman roared angrily. The space around Xiao Mao was suffused with blood-red flames. Xiao Mao then stood still and coldly looked at Yi Shixiang's wild laughter. He said, Yi Shixiang, this Xiao arrogantly thought that you were the young lord and even introduced Fairy Hongxia here. So all of this was a trap that you set up. After Yi Shixiang finished laughing, he looked at Xiao Mao with interest and said, Xiao Mao, don't think that I don't know that you're a subordinate of the Immortal Alliance's Falling Star Sky. You came to my Yi clan under Falling Star Sky's orders, right? Xiao Mao's expression greatly changed. He looked at Yi Shixiang in disbelief and said, How did you know? Could it be? That's right, I knew about it long before you came. Yi Shixiang said indifferently, and I don't mind telling you that Luo Xingtian intentionally leaked this information to me. That's impossible. Xiao Mao's face turned ashen as he cried out involuntarily. If that's the case, why did he send me here? It's simple. Yi Shixiang replied. Because Luo Xingtian was afraid that you would disturb what he wanted to do, so he ordered you to come to me. Of course, he also wants to kill you, but your bloodline is different, your identity is different, and you have a lot of value. He doesn't want to do it for now. What does he want to do? Xiao Mao's heart gradually calmed down as he asked Yi Shixiang. Yi Shixiang shrugged and said with a smile, I originally didn't want to tell you, but when I thought about how you won't live to see the day when Starfall Sky controls the Thunder Control sect, I might as well tell you. Starfall Sky wants to scheme against the Imperial Thunder sect? Xiao Mao was stunned when he heard this. He sneered and said, His ambition is not small. To avoid refinement cultivator, that can't be considered as ambition. Yi Shixiang replied. If he didn't fear Kunlun sect's Taoist master Xianqing, he would have established a sect on Donrain continent long ago. Of course, the current Immortal Union is different from before. Even you have pledged your allegiance to the Immortal Union. The day when Starfall Sky unifies Donrain continent is probably not far away. How do you know so much? Xiao Mao narrowed his eyes and asked. Yi Shixiang smiled and replied. Why would a person who's about to die have so many questions? I don't care what Starfall Sky wants to do. Xiao Mao looked at Yi Shixiang and said word by word. I also don't care what you collude with Starfall Sky. It doesn't matter whether I live or die, but I absolutely won't allow you to have any ideas about my senior sister. Ha ha ha. Yi Shixiang laughed loudly when he heard this. He raised his hand and pointed at Xiao Mao and said, A golden core cultivator who bowed down and begged me to bestow the opportunity to conceive a nascent soul dares to boast like this in front of me. Just by relying on you. A Hamba who's comparable to a late nascent soul cultivator? She's not a Hamba. She's called Huahong. Xiao Mao calmly corrected. Xiao Mao, oh Xiao Mao. Yi Shixiang finished laughing and looked at Hamba who was called Huahong with interest and asked, Do you know why I arranged the alliance with Kai Clan in Sky Patrol City? Xiao Mao suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. He couldn't help but ask, Why? Could it be that you already knew that I have Huahong? Not only do I know that you have a Hamba, I also know that you used a soul bag to bring Hamba from Million Meng Mountains to Sky Patrol City. Yi Shixiang's expression looked more and more like a cat playing with a mouse. Xiao Mao. Fairy Hongxia hurriedly called out. Don't talk too much to him. Xiao Mao's face was distressed. He looked at Yi Shixiang and asked softly, Yi Shixiang, I don't know if you'll tell me, but I still want to ask, Qin Jian, was it you who arranged it? Qin Jian? Fairy Hongxia heard and couldn't help but scold. Xiao Mao, what nonsense are you thinking? How could Qin Jian be arranged by the Yi clan? Senior sister. Xiao Mao turned around and said, I've never told anyone about Huahong. I only revealed it to her once because I was afraid that it would cause Qin Jian to misunderstand. Fairy Hongxia sighed and didn't say anything else. Yi Shixiang looked at Fairy Hongxia and then looked at Xiao Mao's grief-stricken face. He smiled and said, If that's the case, then I might as well tell you. Qin Jian's real name is Yi Jian. He was originally a disciple of the Yi clan. When Yi Yu told the clan about you, the clan had arranged for Yi Jian to be with you. As he spoke, Yi Shixiang raised his hand and took out a sword pouch. He glanced at Hamba and said, Do you think that you can protect Fairy Hongxia's safety with Hamba by your side? I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed outside Sky Patrol City today. Woo. As Yi Shixiang opened the sword pouch, he didn't see what was coming out of the sword pouch, but he heard the sound of wind and snow howling within a dozen miles. The space that was originally controlled by Hamba's dry and fiery heat was suddenly filled with cold ice and wind. This cold intent was like a tidal wave that came from all directions and rushed straight into the sword pouch. Roar! With a furious roar, a huge figure flashed out of the sword pouch. Crack, crack, crack. A series of spatial cracks appeared in the nearby void. Boundless cold intent fell into the figure. A snow tapir that was 100 feet in size stood steadily in mid-air. This snow tapir was in the shape of an ape. Its body was covered with long snow-colored fur. Boundless cold intent overflowed from its fur. Just as the snow tapir stood still, its eyes immediately emitted an ominous glint as it looked at Hamba. Damn it! When Xiao Mao saw the snow tapir flying out, he cursed in his heart. Sure enough, Hamba let out a hoarse cry and waved its hands. Layers of flames immediately pounced on the snow tapir. Looking at the snow tapir again, it just pounded its chest with its claws and opened its mouth. A torrent of cold air was spewed out. When the cold air landed in the air, it immediately froze the nearby space. Even the ice and snow within a few hundred feet surged toward the air pillar and turned into a tide of ice that pounced on the flames. Sizzle. An ear-piercing sound was produced from the ice and fire. Boundless water vapor rose and covered everyone's eyes. Boom! At the same time when the water vapor was produced, the snow tapir waved its claws forward. Amidst the rumbling sound, icicles that were dozens of feet long fell from the sky and smashed toward Hamba's fiery rainbow. Hamba's fiery rainbow was fearless when he saw the icicles approaching. He waved one hand forward and the power of his bloodline pounced on the snow tapir. His other hand waved a fist and hit one of the icicles. Wherever the wind from his fist passed, flames condensed into a fire pillar that directly penetrated the icicle. As for the other icicle, Hamba only snorted. A crimson line of fire flew out of her nostrils and hit the icicle. The huge icicle melted rapidly as soon as it came into contact with the line of fire. Ew! At this moment, the bloodline energy of the Hitorigami had already struck the snow tapir. The snow tapir roared madly while its eyes glowed crimson red. And then its entire body was covered in frost. It was like a layer of ice armor that actually froze the bloodline energy of the Hitorigami. Not only that, but the moment the ice armor was formed, waves of cold inchi rushed out from the snow region beneath the snow tapir and entered the snow tapir's body in a frenzy. As the snow tapir roared, its body grew several times larger. With a slight movement of its claws, huge ice blocks formed around the drought demon's fiery rainbow. Fiery Rainbow was furious. She did not use her firepower. Instead, her body swayed and her arms instantly pierced through the layers of ice. She rushed to the snow tapir and fiery red spikes appeared between her fingers, piercing into the snow tapir's body. Poof, poof, poof. As soon as Fiery Rainbow's spikes pierced into the snow tapir's body, a low muffled sound was heard. Crack, crack, crack. Layers of hard ice crystals appeared from the spikes. Although they cracked instantly, they still blocked the spikes. Woo! The snow tapir suddenly lifted its head. The sound of wind whistling was heard as it hit Fiery Rainbow's abdomen. Fiery Rainbow saw that, and did not dare to be slow. She hurriedly waved her arms to block it. Bang! Unfortunately, the snow tapir's strength was so great that it actually sent Fiery Rainbow flying. However, the moment she was sent flying, Fiery Rainbow pressed her hand backward. A crimson fire pillar appeared from her palm and hit the snow tapir's leg. Awoo! The hard ice was instantly destroyed. Excruciating pain came from the snow tapir's leg. The snow tapir could not help but roar. Although the snow tapir's strength was slightly weaker, it was able to draw support from the power of ice and snow of the Sky Patrol City's snowfield to fight evenly with Hitorigami. Yi Shixiang's eyes were filled with satisfaction. He turned to look at Fairy Hongxia and said, "Fairy, although I've done so many calculations, it's actually all for you. Moreover, I don't mind telling you that my Yi clan's foundation is far beyond what you've imagined. It's also far beyond what you've seen now. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian. Vote for it, vote for it, vote for it, donate it, and thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 5184. There's no need to say any more. Fairy Hongxia's expression was even colder than the icy plains as she mercilessly rejected him. Kill ah kill. Yi Shixiang still wanted to say something, but above the Sky Patrol City, countless cyan sword lights soared into the sky. The Fortune Gate's disciples in front of the sword formation hesitated for a moment. Then they activated their flying swords and magic artifacts and charged towards the sword formation according to their original plan. Seeing this, Yi Shixiang unconsciously smiled and said, Fairy Hongxia, you're refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit ah. Since that's the case, don't blame me for using force. As he said that, Yi Shixiang raised his hand. Wu. His left arm transformed into a giant hand formed from sword lights and grabbed at Fairy Hongxia. If you want to use force, you'll have to get past me first. Xiao Mao felt extremely guilty. He really didn't know that he had fallen into Yi Shixiang's trap from the start. He also didn't know that his good intentions had led Fairy Hongxia into a trap. However, he knew that Fairy Hongxia was definitely not Yi Shixiang's opponent. At this time, Xiao Mao was also prepared to die. He moved his body and blocked in front of Fairy Hongxia. As he chanted some inexplicable words, his arms instantly turned blood red. Xiao Mao's hands grabbed at the air and two blood-red shadows several zhang in size shot out from his arms and grabbed at Yi Shixiang. Junior brother Xiao, I'll help you. Fairy Hongxia naturally wouldn't sit still and wait for death. Seeing Xiao Mao make a move, Fairy Hongxia let out a furious roar and raised her hand to slap the top of her head. Wu. A fiery red brilliance emerged from the top of Fairy Hongxia's head and condensed into a 300-meter-long yuanying hand that grabbed at Yi Shixiang's sword light hand. Fairy Hongxia's nascent soul hand arrived first and collided with Yi Shixiang's sword light hand. Rumble! In a loud explosion, the two large hands were annihilated at the same time. Sword light and brilliance splashed in all directions. The surrounding space was even cracked by the shockwave. Looking at the two of them, Fairy Hongxia's body swayed, and she was involuntarily sent flying several zhang. Her face was flushed red. As for Yi Shixiang, he was as steady as a boulder. His left hand suddenly made a grabbing motion, and another sword light hand appeared out of thin air. This time, the sword light hand was much stronger than before. Before it landed, it had already sealed the space around Fairy Hongxia. Swoosh! At this moment, Xiao Mao's two blood-colored shadows swept across the sky and landed beside Yi Shixiang. Along with the descent of this blood-colored shadow, fine blood runes appeared all over Yi Shixiang's body. The blood runes were like ripples on a lake as they rippled on the surface of Yi Shixiang's body and gradually seeped into Yi Shixiang's heart meridians. Heh. Yi Shixiang controlled the sword light while looking down at his own body. He laughed. Is this the power of bloodline? Looks like this is all there is to it. Along with Yi Shixiang's voice, the flying sword in Yi Shixiang's right hand suddenly ignited. Yi Shixiang grinned maliciously and waved his hand. Roar! A several zhang long coiling dragon was born from the flying sword. It roared angrily and pounced towards the blood-colored shadow. Wherever the coiling dragon passed, the blood-colored shadow would be swept away and devoured by the coiling dragon. The coiling dragon even swung its tail, and actually followed the trail of the blood-colored shadow as it pounced towards Xiao Mao. This is a Dao cultivator's spirit weapon? Xiao Mao couldn't help but cry out when he felt a suffocating spiritual beast aura assaulting his face. A feeling of innate restraint involuntarily arose from the bottom of his heart, making it hard for him to resist. Haha. Yi Shixiang laughed loudly and said, That's right. I'll use your bloodline to make this old man's spirit weapon. PFFF. Xiao Mao didn't dare to be negligent. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. He hastily waved his hands and streaks of blood-colored shadows were born from his hands. As the blood-colored shadows flew out, Xiao Mao's complexion became increasingly ghastly pale. In just a few breaths, the blood essence transformed into a human figure. Go. Xiao Mao raised his hand and grabbed. With a low roar, the blood-colored shadow suddenly expanded and became several zhang long as it charged towards the coiling dragon. Boom! The human-shaped blood-colored shadow collided with the coiling dragon and was annihilated at the same time. The sound wasn't deafening, but within this sound, the space within a 300 zhang radius was corroded. Strands of indescribable pitch black seeped out from the void. Ah! Xiao Mao let out a blood-curdling scream as his body withered and collapsed in midair. Roar roar! Drought Demon, who had been lured away by the snow taper, sensed that Xiao Mao was injured. It roared angrily and wanted to fly back, but at this moment, Drought Demon was like a flame that had fallen into a frozen river. Although the flames were very powerful, the nearby ice and snow power was too vast. No matter how anxious it was, it couldn't break through the snow taper's blockade, and couldn't get close at all. Junior Marshal Brother Xiao. Fairy Hongxia was greatly alarmed. She wanted to move her body over to help, but Yi Shixiang's sword light hand had already descended. She didn't dare to be distracted. Her body trembled, and with a clear cry, an ice phoenix dharma body that was several hundred zhang long flew out from Fairy Hongxia's body. Although this ice phoenix dharma body was a dharma body, it didn't look any different from a real ice phoenix. Once the ice phoenix appeared, a myriad of ice and snow power gushed out from the void. An aura comparable to the middle and late nascent soul stage was emitted from the ice phoenix's body. Ka. The ice phoenix spread its wings, and its sharp claws grabbed at the sword light hand. Streaks of frost were like swords, shattering Yi Shixiang's sword light hand. When Yi Shixiang saw this, he wasn't alarmed but happy instead. He cried out, "Fairy Hongxia, I didn't expect your ice phoenix dharma body to be so powerful." Ka. The ice phoenix let out a clear cry and flapped its wings. A murderous aura soared into the sky. The ice phoenix's phoenix eyes were filled with anger as it flew towards Yi Shixiang. Its sharp claws that streaked across the void flickered with cold light. A bone-piercing coldness was born from its sharp claws, enveloping Yi Shixiang in a radius of several hundred zhang. When he saw how powerful the ice phoenix was, Yi Shixiang's expression turned solemn. He didn't dare to be careless. Sword light surged around his body, and the flying sword in his right hand let out an ear-piercing sword cry at the same time. He gradually waved it. The outcome of Yi Shixiang and Fairy Hongxia's battle would be decided in this one strike. Right at this moment, for earth-shattering booms came from the ground. The mountains shook and the earth shook. An enormous and unparalleled suction force rushed out and enveloped the space where Yi Shixiang, Xiao Mao, Fairy Hongxia, and the Ice Phoenix were. They couldn't resist at all. Fairy Hongxia and the Ice Phoenix were both grabbed by a huge hand and dragged down several hundred zhang into an enormous blood vortex. Damn it! Although the majestic suction force swept past him, it had no effect on him. How could Yi Shixiang not know that Yu Tong and Yin Jiechong had made a move? He cursed under his breath and looked down. When he looked down, even Yi Shixiang sucked in a breath of cold air and exclaimed, "How? How did it become like this?" On the ground, there were several mountains that stood tall in the frozen snowfield. At this time, other than the mountain that they were facing, the other 4 mountains to their left had collapsed. The collapse of these 4 mountains was different from usual. It wasn't as if the mountain rocks had collapsed and rolled around. Instead, the entire mountain had collapsed into the ground as if a huge fist had smashed the 4 mountains into the ground. Following the collapse of the mountain peaks, 4 pitch-black abysses that were more than 10 li wide appeared outside the Sky Patrol City. If it was just the abysses, Yi Shixiang might not have been so shocked. Because at this time, within the abysses, there were layers of thick purple chi that had condensed into a funnel-like purple vortex. It soared into the sky and enveloped the surrounding 100 li. Not only were the thousands of sword cultivators and the 5 aristocratic families' disciples in the Sky Patrol City trapped, but a small number of Fortune Gate's disciples were also trapped. The purple vortex that had sucked Fairy Hongxia and the Ice Phoenix avatar into it was not far away from the sword formation. Looking at the sword formation, whether it was Heavenly Gate Mountains Huangmingxiang, Su Yenyun's Yun family's Yun Xiaoying, or Fallen Gold Mountains Yu family's Yu Xiong, They had all released their true spirit avatars under Yu Tong and Yun Guicheng's orders when the Fortune Gate's disciples attacked. Even the other disciples of the three families who could use their avatars had also released their faint and unformed avatars. For spirit blood curse? Yi Shixiang was indeed worthy of being the Yi family's patriarch. When he saw this scene, he immediately understood something. A kind of jealousy appeared in his eyes as he cursed inwardly. Damn it, this old man only saw Fairy Hongxia's innate spirit body and neglected her Ice Phoenix bloodline. I didn't expect Yu Tong and Yun Guicheng to have this idea. But, thinking of this, Yi Shixiang hurriedly released his divine sense to investigate. Sure enough, the four-spirit blood curse was somewhat inverted. The four purple vortexes were drawn out from the ground at an oblique angle. It looked very forced and seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. Boom, boom, boom. The moment Yi Shixiang released his divine sense, the three purple vortexes in the distance vibrated at the same time as if they were breathing. A huge undulation appeared from the ground and rushed to the top of the vortexes. Then, another three huge suction forces were spat out from the vortexes, pulling Huang Mengxiang and her vermilion bird avatar, Yun Xiaoying and her flame dragon avatar, Yu Xiong and his silver tiger avatar, and even several other disciples and their avatars into the abyss. Ooh, the ground shook again, and the four vortexes showed the same rhythm. Countless blood threads began to spread in the air like spiritual snakes as everyone fell into the abyss. Moreover, as the blood threads spread, the vortexes began to expand, enveloping even more Fortune Gate disciples. As the blood threads spread, two faint silver-white crystal threads stretched out from the four vortexes. When they reached the center of the space, they merged into two more threads and went deep into the four-spirit blood curse. Weren't they standing there with complacent expressions on Yu Tong and Yun Guicheng's faces? Although Yun Guicheng did not release his fire dragon celestial body, the flames around his body circled like a dragon, scorching the surrounding void. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian, vote for it, vote for it, vote for it, give it a tip, and thank you to Alliance Master Daoist Xiao for your tip. Chapter 5185. In just a few breaths of time, the blood threads had already reached the top of the whirlpool, and a series of crackling sounds could be heard. Countless blood threads mixed with purple qi wrapped around the disciples of the Yun, Yu, Kai, and Huang families. Ah! A series of miserable shrieks could be heard as the bodies of these disciples were minced into pieces and sucked into the whirlpool. Not good. Yi Shixiang was shocked in his heart and he hurriedly shouted, Yu Tong, what are you doing? Yu Tong glanced at Yi Shixiang indifferently and said, Young Master Yi, what is our agreement? You don't have to care about what we do. You do your thing and I will do mine. There is no need to interfere with each other. Your Yi family disciples will definitely be unharmed. This young master naturally won't care about anything else. Yi Shixiang said angrily, quickly release Fairy Hongxia. You didn't say that you wanted to harm Fairy Hongxia's life. If you did, this young master would definitely not have agreed to it. While he was speaking, countless miserable shrieks could be heard as the bodies of the patrolling Sword Gate's disciples were minced into pieces by the purple whirlpool. The four purple whirlpools spun like a millstone, mincing and devouring the bodies of the Sword Cultivators and Fortune Gate's disciples. The purple whirlpool gradually turned red. Fairy Hongxia's life isn't part of our agreement. Yu Tong looked at the four-spirit blood curse with satisfaction before sweeping a glance at Yi Shixiang. He replied indifferently, Moreover, I reluctantly agreed to the condition that you raised earlier. It's a pity that you didn't manage to persuade Fairy Hongxia, so I can only follow the original plan. However, you were actually able to see that this Yu was the mastermind behind all of this. This can be considered commendable. Then this Yu won't haggle with you about the other matter of changing the agreement without permission. The other thing that Yu Tong was talking about was naturally the moving of the four spirits' blood curse. At this time, the four spirits' blood curse had gradually entered a good state under Yun Zhukong's control. The previous shaky state had stabilized. Strands of crystal light from the purple vortex turned into pure blood strands, and rushed into the blood formation. In the void near the blood strands, indescribable ghostly sounds, distorted illusions, and other strange phenomena gradually appeared, making people know that the blood formation was in defiance of the natural order at first glance. Damn it! Yi Shixiang roared. Fairy Hongxia is this young master's Dao companion. Even if this young master has to fall out with you all, this young master will definitely save her. Young Master Yi? A blush appeared on Yutong's face. It was unknown whether it was because of excitement or because the blood vessels below him had begun to surge. His voice was slightly shrill. Are you prepared to be a traitor? That's right. Yi Shixiang's eyes also turned red. I'd rather have my reputation ruined than let go of a chance to obtain a Dao companion. Yutong's eyes were filled with ridicule. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but he closed it again. He raised his hand and pointed at the huge abyss that Fairy Hongxia had fallen into and said indifferently, Young Master Yi, it's not that this you is looking down on you, but with your second-grade sword transformation strength, you're nothing in front of this you. If you have the ability, then go ahead and save her. However, this you will speak bluntly. If you dare to save her, then don't be afraid of throwing your life away. This. Yi Shixiang was somewhat hesitant. After all, the aura of the 4 purplish-red whirlpools was becoming increasingly powerful, and had already surpassed the limits of a sword transformation swordsman's control. The snow taper and Hitorigami that were fighting earlier were also disturbed by this heavenly phenomenon and stopped fighting. Hitorigami tried his best to charge into the blood formation to search for Xiao Mao, but to no avail. How could Yi Shixiang dare to take the risk? Yutong smiled and said, Young Master Yi, let's not talk about what happened earlier. Our cooperation is perfect. After this matter, this you and junior brother Yun's strength will rise to another level. It will be even more beneficial for our cooperation. Speaking of this, Yutong raised his head and looked at the mountain range in the distance. After the Fortune Gate's disciples had left, peace was restored. However, at this time sword lights appeared again like broken stars. In the sky, the wind and clouds were surging in all directions. Obviously, another wave of snowstorm was coming. Yutong withdrew his gaze and looked at Yi Shixiang, saying meaningfully, Moreover, the Yi clan's plan is not here. Why is young Master Yi so conflicted? Why don't you look further? As the saying goes, there are plenty of fish in the sea. How can young Master Yi hang himself on a crooked tree like Fairy Hongxia? Yi Shixiang pursed his lips and did not say a word, as if he was thinking about something. Yutong lowered his head and looked at the formation. The inside of the formation had become a sea of blood. Most of the sword cultivators and Fortune Gate's disciples had been turned into blood that flowed into the abyss through the vortex. Outside the sea of blood, several hundred Yi clan's disciples were standing there in a panic. They were like ants in front of a powerful force that was as powerful as heaven's will. Other than the Yi clan's disciples, there was another person who was unexpectedly struggling with all his might. This person was Xiao Mao. Even though Xiao Mao wasn't strong enough, and had even been injured by Yi Shixiang, he was still a soul cultivator from the Lux village after all. Within the blood curse of the 4 spirits, he was able to rely on his mastery of the power of his bloodline to resist the strangulation of the blood formation. Young Master Yi, Yutong said half-jokingly half-seriously, this Yu's patience is limited. If young master doesn't make a decision, not only will the several hundred Yi clan's disciples be trapped inside the sword formation, even young master will not be able to protect himself. At that time, I'm afraid this you will not be able to answer to the Yi clan's patriarch. Therefore, I ask young Master Yi to reconsider. Don't let your previous efforts go to waste. All right. Yi Shixiang finally gritted his teeth and said, regarding today's matter, this young master will take it as suffering a loss in silence. Yutong said coldly, young Master Yi is wrong. It's this you who has suffered 2 losses in silence. Yi Shixiang fiercely glared at Yutong. His figure swayed, and he rushed out of the blood formation's range. Yutong said a few words to Yun Jiecheng, who was controlling the blood formation, but Yun Jiecheng looked up at Yi Shixiang. Those blood-red eyes clearly revealed unwillingness. However, in the end, Yun Jiecheng waved his hand, and a crack that was less than a few feet was torn open in the closed blood formation. My apologies, Yin Jiecheng said with a hoarse voice. Because this sword formation deviated, this yin can't control it as I wish. Now I can only open up this small crack. I hope young Master Yi can understand. Well said. Young Master Yi looked at that small crack. It was like a person standing under the city wall facing a dog hole. Although he was furious, there wasn't any special expression on his face. He responded in a low voice and said loudly, Yi clan's disciples, follow this young master out. Yes, the Yi clan's disciples responded. They immediately realized that the force that was tightly suppressing them had suddenly disappeared. Everyone was ecstatic, as if they had been pardoned. They immediately urged their figures to fly towards Yi Shixiang, and prepared to fly out of the formation. Yi Shixiang didn't even look at them. He turned into a sword light, and directly crashed into that crack that wasn't much bigger than a dog hole. Ha! When Yin Jiecheng saw Yi Shixiang flying into the crack, he couldn't help but laugh loudly. He looked at Yu Tong and said, Senior Marshal Brother Yu, this younger brother is really happy today. This younger brother doesn't dare to look at this guy's face for a long time. Yu Tong smiled faintly and said, Today is just the beginning. We merely let the Yi clan's young master see our faces. After today, you and I will exchange our true spirit bloodlines for saint spirit bloodlines. After we cultivate in seclusion for a few hundred years, we can expect to split our spirit and separate our bodies. At that time, when you look at the entire Dawn Rain continent, everything will have to see your face. Everything that happened today is nothing but dust. Ha 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 ha. Yin Jiecheng looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. The flames around his body turned blood red. That flame dragon avatar once again expanded by 30%. A ferocious dragon avatar was about to leave his body. Yin Jiecheng's laughter rippled through the entire blood curse space, appearing especially enchanting. Yu Tong still had a smile on his face as he quietly watched. However, the corner of his eyes occasionally glanced at his feet. The pure bloodline power was becoming increasingly exuberant. Kill! Kill! Ah! Ewo! Countless shouts and screams rang in Zhong Haoren's ears. Not only did these sounds stop in Zhong Haoren's ears, they also attacked his conscience. They were constantly tearing at Zhong Haoren's heart. Swoosh! An inexplicable sword light slashed under his armpit, piercing through his protective sword light, and deeply piercing into his body. A burning pain came from the wound. Hiss! Zhong Haoren sucked in a breath. The immense pain made his body tremble, but at the same time, a sense of satisfaction arose. Zhong Haoren did not even lift his eyelids. With a wave of his left hand, a scarlet sword light flew out. Ah! Another scream was heard. The swordsman who had sneak attacked him died under this blow. Zhong Haoren's figure staggered slightly, but he barely managed to stand still in midair. When he looked around, the Fortune Gate disciples and Sword Cultivator disciples fighting on the left had thinned out. The sword formation on the south side of the Sky Patrol City had actually collapsed under the Fortune Gate's attacks. Without any hesitation, Zhong Haoren grabbed the hilt of the flying sword that had pierced into his body. Puff! Dirty blood splashed out. Zhong Haoren once again urged the sword origin, and a three-colored sword light gushed out from the wound to protect it. Was I wrong? Zhong Haoren did not look at his wound anymore. Instead, he lowered his head to look at the ground. The white ground was now covered in blood. The remains of hundreds of sword cultivators and Fortune Gate disciples were scattered everywhere. None of these corpses were intact. Some of them were still staring helplessly at the sky. Although their eyes were lifeless, in Zhong Haoren's eyes, it was as if he could see his own heart. Is it worth it for me to do this for the sake of the Fortune Gate's rise? Just because I'm about to die, should I use the lives of these Fortune Gate disciples to cleanse the disciples that I'm not sure of? I clearly know that this Sky Patrol City may be a bait, so why should I risk it all? P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian. Vote for it, vote for it, vote for it, give it a tip, and thank you to the Alliance Master Taoist Xiao for your tip. Thank you to all fellow Taoists for your support. Chapter 5186. Fighting Spirit in One Go. weakening in the second, and exhausting in the third. Although our Fortune Gate's disciples are charging into the sword formation in one go, it's obvious that these sword cultivators are avoiding our attacks. Once our Fortune Gate's disciples are slightly weakened, they will definitely launch a large-scale counterattack. At that time, it will be our Fortune Gate's time to retreat. Maybe Zhao Ming is right. After this battle in the Sky Patrol City, our Fortune Gate's disciples will grow, but what about these fallen disciples? What about the culprit who instigated the battle between our Fortune Gate and the Sky Patrol City? Is their target the Fortune Gate or the Sky Patrol City? If our Fortune Gate is defeated, do we still have a chance to survive? 1,000 regrets and 1,000 thoughts flowed into Zhong Haoren's mind like floating cotton, causing him to be unable to see the situation of the battle. Woo! At this moment, a low whistling sound came from not far away. A cultivator at the middle stage of the Gold Core realm urged his figure to break away from the battle, and flew towards the distance without the slightest hesitation. Zhong Haoren raised his gaze and saw it clearly. Wasn't that the sect master of the Wisdom Pavilion, Wu Cheng? Zhong Haoren sneered and thought to himself, I'm relieved to have found a deserting sect master. However, just as Zhong Haoren was about to withdraw his gaze, he suddenly saw some sword lights in the sky behind him from the corner of his eye. He couldn't help but be stunned for a moment before he hurriedly turned around to look towards the south. At this time, there were already groups of people flying over from the vast snow domain. These people did not look as powerful as the Fortune Gate's disciples, but the momentum they exuded was something the Fortune Gate's disciples could not compare to. Within the momentum, layers of sword intent condensed and sealed off the Fortune Gate disciples' escape route. Sure enough. Seeing this, Zhong Haoren breathed a sigh of relief as if he had finally seen the end. He whispered, "This is the sword cultivator's trap." However, before Zhong Haoren could think about why the sword cultivators would attack the Fortune Gate disciples, there were screams of ecstasy from the battle group. Quick, look! Our sword cultivators' reinforcements are here. Kill. Above the Sky Patrol City's southern city gates, the sword formation that looked like a cocoon was being torn apart. Groups of swordsmen flew out and pounced on the Fortune Gate's disciples who had destroyed the sword formation outside the city gates like wolves and tigers. The number of swordsmen that came later was several times more than the swordsmen that came before. Seeing so many swordsmen flying out and being surrounded by sword cultivators, the Fortune Gate disciples were already flustered. The advantage they had gained earlier collapsed in an instant. Many Fortune Gate disciples put away their flying swords and magic artifacts to protect themselves, hesitating on how to deal with the situation. More Fortune Gate disciples' figures flickered as they broke away from the battle, seemingly wanting to escape. In an instant, the whole battle was in chaos. Fortune Gate disciples, heed my command, kill. Zhong Zhan's hoarse voice could be heard amidst the chaos. We can only survive if we kill our way into Sky Patrol City. Hearing Zhong Zhan's words, the nearby Fortune Gate disciples were ready to attack again. They wanted to kill their way into Sky Patrol City before the sword cultivators arrived. Yen Sun Manor's disciples. Then, another loud voice could be heard. It was Cheng Jizi's voice. Heed my command, form a group and turn back. We'll take advantage of the fact that the sword cultivators have yet to form and break through the encirclement. Where's Wu City? Where's that damn Wu City? Zhao Ming's voice could also be heard amidst the chaos. Damn it. Seeing this, Zhong Haoren cursed in a low voice. He raised his hand and put it into his bosom. He had already taken out another crimson sword. Martial uncle. Fei Yunshu flew out from Zhong Haoren's left side. His clothes were also soaked in blood. He said anxiously, "It really happened, what should we do?" Although Zhong Haoren's heart was in a mess, he could not show it in front of his disciples. He smiled calmly and said, "What are you afraid of? We've already anticipated this situation and we've even discussed it. Alright, this disciple will listen to martial uncle." Fei Yunshu looked at the scarlet sword in Zhong Haoren's hand and knew that Zhong Haoren had made a decision. He sighed in relief and nodded. Swoosh! In the distant battlefield, a dim golden light flashed and Zhong Zhan's figure landed not far away from Zhong Haoren. Zhong Zhan's robe was tattered and stained with blood. His left hand was gone, and his right hand was holding an equally broken magic treasure. Before he could steady himself, Zhongzhan angrily said, "Martial uncle, are you still thinking about the escape route at this point? This is the time to test our Fortune Gate's disciples. As long as we pass this hurdle and take down the Sky Patrol City, our Fortune Gate's name will immediately spread throughout the world. Once you give the order, all our previous plans will be for naught." Fei Yunshu was also angry. "Zhongzhan, don't you see? Our Fortune Gate's disciples are surrounded by sword cultivators. We've really fallen into their trap. The only way to escape from this trap is to retreat." "You're wrong." Zhongzhan's eyes were like fire as he resolutely shook his head and said, "We can only fight with our backs to the wall and attack the Sky Patrol City. If we don't have the heart to die, none of us will be able to escape from this hopeless situation today. How am I wrong?" Fei Yunshu shouted. "Previously, we arranged for the Fortune Gate to surround the Sky Patrol City from all sides, with the real attack from the east, west and south and a feint attack from the north. This was to let the Sky Patrol City's sword cultivators know that they might not be able to defeat our Fortune Gate's disciples and escape from the north. But now, not only did the Sky Patrol City's sword cultivators not escape, they even opened the Sky Patrol City's defensive sword array and counterattacked our Fortune Gate. Our plan has been seen through by the Sky Patrol City, and they want to attack our Fortune Gate with the sword cultivators behind us. We have already expected this situation, so we can only retreat." Zhong Haoran restrained his temper and wanted to persuade Zhongzhan, but at this moment, most of the Fortune Gate's disciples on the south side of the Sky Patrol City had already started to retreat. The Burning Crane Union's Zhao Ming was giving orders in a low voice, while the Chu Hong faction's Wang Jiancheng, Cloud Pavilion Fort Suzhonglin, Heaven Competing Pavilions Zhuahong, and Yuanfeng Stockade's Zhou Ji had already gone to the east and west sides of the Sky Patrol City. Zhong Haoran did not know how they would deal with this, but since Zhao Ming was ready to escape, the other sect's chiefs would definitely not fight to the death like Zhongzhan. Sigh. Zhong Haoran sighed as a sense of helplessness rose in his heart. He no longer hesitated and opened his mouth. A blood-red flying sword flew out and hit the sword in his hand. "Martial uncle!" Zhongzhan cried out in grief, as if he had just witnessed the world's most precious thing being destroyed. Kung. The sword emitted a metallic sound and soared into the sky. After flying for more than 100 zhang, the sword emitted a thunderous boom and a light shadow rapidly emerged. A flying sword several dozen zhang in size appeared, and this scarlet flying sword soared through the sky at an extremely fast speed, piercing through the dark clouds. Swoosh! The dark clouds were pierced through, and a pillar of sunlight pierced through the dark clouds like a sword, piercing through the sky and landing on the north side of the Sky Patrol City. Go! All the Fortune Gate's disciples already had the intention to retreat. Seeing that Zhong Haoran was about to give the order to retreat, they no longer hesitated. They shouted in a low voice and urged their bodies to retreat, gathering at the south side of the Sky Patrol City. Who? Looking at the blood-red flying sword piercing through the dark clouds, Zhongzhan's heart felt as if it had been pierced through. His eyes instantly lost their spirit, but it only lasted for a moment before they regained their determination. He looked at Fei Yunshu and Zhong Haoran and said, "Both of you leave." "I'm not leaving. I'm going to kill my way to the Sky Patrol City." Zhongzhan. Chapter 5187. However, seeing that the closest sword cultivator was closing in on him, and hearing the battle cries coming from behind him, Zhong Haoran raised his right hand and placed it on his throat, shouting hoarsely, "Zhongzhan, are you leaving or not? If you don't leave, this old man will die here." "Martial uncle." Zhongzhan smiled wryly. "Don't lie to this disciple. You gave the command of the Fortune Gate to this disciple. Isn't it because you have the same idea as this disciple?" Zhongzhan turned to look at Fei Yunshu, who had not left, and said, "Yunshu, you arranged your Fortune Gate to the north of Sky Patrol City and followed us, but didn't you also see through Martial Uncle's plan? This old man's life is coming to an end. It doesn't matter where I die." Zhong Haoran said indifferently, "But you are different. You have a long lifespan, and the Fortune Gate's future depends on you. This old man has failed Daoist Zhao's trust, and I have no face to see him in the underworld. You must not follow in this old man's footsteps." Unfortunately, Zhongzhan was unmoved. He looked coldly at Zhong Haoran and said, "Martial uncle, what's done is done. What should be done must be done. You don't need to coerce this disciple. This disciple did not listen to you in the past, and now this disciple will not." Fei Yunshu gritted his teeth and flew to Zhong Haoran's side shouting, "Martial uncle, since we have no intention of leaving, why do you have to do this? Why don't we kill our way over? Killing one sword cultivator is one." As he spoke, he looked at Zhongzhan and said, "Zhongzhan, although I said that I had forgiven you earlier, in reality, I still feel disdain for what you have done. Even today, I still don't think what you did in the past was honorable. However, since you want to die, I will accompany you. When we reach the underworld, I ask Daoist Xiao to judge for us." "Good." Zhongzhan nodded. "It's a deal." Zhongzhan's gaze swept over the sword Zhong Haoran was holding at his throat, and he roared, "For the Fortune Gate, for Daoist Xiao kill." Amidst the cries of the sword cultivators, this voice sounded so lonely and desolate, yet so stubborn and so fearless. It was as if there was only one person shouting on an endless narrow road. "Kill." Fei Yunshu wasn't willing to fall behind Zhongzhan by even half a minute. Before Zhongzhan could finish shouting, he also roared angrily and dashed towards the sword cultivator. It was as if he was walking a completely different path from Zhongzhan. The end of the road was also far away, but it seemed like they were heading back to the same destination. "All right." Zhong Haoran saw that his two disciples were ignoring him, but he didn't feel awkward at all. With such loyal disciples accompanying him on the road to the Yellow Springs, he wouldn't be lonely. He applauded and said, "Since that's the case, let's all go."